Chapter 1083. Compared to the difficult situation at the Shocking Waves Lake Pass, the situation at the Dark Moon Forest Pass was undoubtedly much better. The insect swarm coming out from the crack was divided into two groups. One group went north to the Dark Moon Forest Pass, and the other went south to the Shocking Waves Lake Pass. Although there were many insects going north, and some of them were at the Spirit Sea Realm, there were only two of them. Plus, Li Taibai and Lin Yu, two Spirit Sea Realm warriors, were guarding the pass. Therefore, the situation was under control from beginning to end. After Lin Yu and Li Taibai worked together to kill the two insects, the situation was completely stabilized. Now what the cultivators of the Dark Moon Forest Pass needed to do was to fight steadily and slowly nibble away at the insects. This way, they could eliminate the insects to the greatest extent while ensuring their own safety. At this point, Lin Yu's mood also relaxed as a medical cultivator next to her was treating her injuries. Her injuries weren't light, but they weren't serious either. They were from the fight with the two insects. For a Spirit Sea Realm cultivator, it wasn't to the extent that it would affect their strength. She turned to look at Lu Yi. "Junior brother, you've worked hard. You did well this time. I will go to 10,000 Demon City and ask for a reward for you." Li Taibai's performance in dealing with the insect tide this time, undoubtedly, made her extremely satisfied. If it weren't for his help, this insect tide wouldn't have been so easy to deal with. Breaking the defensive line would have been light, but there would have been a lot of casualties. Especially when she was killing those two giant insects. The sharpness of Li Taibai's flying sword made her worry less. The sword light that came and went back and forth often appeared when she needed it the most, sharing her worries and solving her difficulties. The strength he displayed was extremely strong. Lin Yu secretly sighed. As expected of someone who could kill enemies above their realm, this kind of performance wasn't something that any second-order Spirit Sea Realm cultivator could compare with. If it were anyone else, it would be good if they didn't hinder her, let alone help her so much. She used to think that Li Taibai was a character who could compete with Grand Heaven Union's Lu Yi. But now it seemed that her vision was too low. Lu Yi had indeed stirred up a lot of trouble in the Spirit Stream battlefield and Cloud River battlefield, attracting the attention of the top sects of Myriad Demon Ridge. But after breaking through to the True Lake Realm, there seemed to be no news about him, especially in the past few years. When they were young, they would show off their abilities, but as they grew older, they would slowly fade away. This was a clear sign that they were lacking in stamina. It seemed that Lu Yi was such a person. When his cultivation was not high, he had shown extraordinary talent and monstrous talent. With his own strength, he had made many large sects fear him. But now, as his cultivation gradually increased, he slowly returned to mediocrity. In comparison, a rising star like Li Taibai was the real new force that had suddenly emerged. In the Spirit Stream Realm and the Cloud River Realm, he hadn't been in the limelight at all. In fact, no one had even heard of him. However, when he reached the True Lake Realm and the Spirit Sea Realm, he suddenly exploded with power. Only people like that could go far and achieve things that others couldn't. Supposedly, a few tens of years ago, the Jade Blood Sect's Feng Wujiang was such a person. When his cultivation wasn't high, he was extremely mediocre. But once he soared into the sky, he soared through the sky and quickly arrived at a height that ordinary cultivators would never be able to attain in their entire lifetimes. This kind of person was a late bloomer. Of course, with Li Taibai's age, he couldn't be considered a late bloomer. But that was the logic behind it. Lin Yu let her imagination run wild. In her heart, Lu Yi wasn't even fit to carry Li Taibai's shoes. In the recent 100 years, only Feng Wujiang could be mentioned in the same breath as Li Taibai. "It's my duty. Senior sister, you're too serious," the doppelganger replied. He looked forward, as if he was observing the movements of the insect swarm. In fact, he was paying attention to the situation of the main body. He had to think of a way to help the main body. The 8 insects were chasing closely. The main body had exhausted too much energy in the battle. Even if he was rapidly replenishing his energy, due to the limited time, it was difficult for him to fully recover. If he wanted to eliminate the enemy in this battle, he had to work together with the main body and the doppelganger. This was also the reason why the main body led the 8 insects to escape in this direction. Lu Yi didn't know when the reinforcements from the Haotian alliance would come. Under such circumstances, this was the only choice he could make. As for whether the Shocking Waves Lake Pass could be defended after he left, it wasn't something he could control. He could only hope that the soldiers at the pass could hold on. No one could help him in a short period of time. But within 1,000 miles, there was a natural helper, and that was his doppelganger. As long as he did it well, even if he couldn't kill all 8 insects, he could kill half of them. As for the rest, as long as there wasn't a large-scale insect swarm to help him, they wouldn't be a threat. The distance was getting closer and closer. The main body had already led the 8 insects to the border of the pass. The doppelganger didn't hesitate anymore. He said, "Senior sister, I'll go kill another group." As soon as he finished speaking, he activated his sword radiance and dashed into the insect swarm. In an instant, the sword chi was raging. Because he and Lin Yu had killed most of the Divine Sea Realm insects, although there was still a large number of them, they couldn't pose a threat to him anymore. Of course, the premise was that he didn't stay in the insect swarm for too long. Without the Dragon Emperor's protection, it would be troublesome to be trapped in the insect swarm. The main body dared to fight in the insect swarm alone, because of the Dragon Emperor's protection. Before Lin Yu could say anything, Li Taibai's figure was drowned by the insect swarm. Lin Yu couldn't help but laugh. However, she was happy that Li Taibai was willing to work so hard. Although they hadn't known each other for a long time, she was satisfied with Li Taibai. This person didn't have the youthful vigor of a young man, nor did he have the arrogance of a genius. He could execute all of her orders perfectly, and was approachable to the other soldiers at the pass. It was easy to get along with such a person. It could be said that Li Taibai had gained a lot of respect in the past few months, since he came to the pass. All the soldiers loved and respected him. Feeling the intense spiritual power fluctuations in the insect swarm, Lin Yu knew that it was Li Taibai killing the enemy. However, she soon realized that something was wrong, because the movements of killing the enemy gradually quieted down and disappeared. Even with her divine sense, she couldn't detect Li Taibai's aura. She panicked and hurriedly checked the battlefield imprint. After confirming that Li Taibai's imprint was intact, she hurriedly sent a message. "Junior brother Taibai, where did you go?" Not receiving a response, Lin Yu was at a loss for a moment. At this moment, the doppelganger was rushing in the direction of the main body. It flew straight to the fissure where the insect swarm was surging out. Only then did it slow down and descend toward the fissure. Hiding in a hidden place, it activated concealment and breath control to enhance itself, and quietly lay dormant. At this moment, the 8 insects were circling around the area under the lead of the main body. The reason for this was, firstly, to wait for the doppelganger to get into position. Secondly, it was to stall for time so that it could recover its strength. Only when the doppelganger was ready did Lu Ye's figure tremble and fly toward the fissure. The 8 giant insects followed closely behind him, unable to shake him off like a pair of irascible sisters. Lu Yi deliberately lowered his flying altitude, flying only 300 feet away from the fissure. The dogs and insects followed him without any warning. Killing intent burst out and sword light flashed. Sword rays flew out from the cracks in the ground like waterfalls, converging into a river of sword rays. The river of sword rays split into 3, turning into 3 sword dragons, crazily spinning and drilling. In the blink of an eye, they attacked the bottom of the last 3 hounds. Although the intelligence of the dogs and insects was higher than that of ordinary insects, it was still limited. Who would have thought that there was a hidden killing intent below? By the time they reacted, it was already too late. 2 of the sword dragons easily tore open the abdomens of the dogs and insects. Sword light poured in, and instantly killed them on the spot. Basically, all insects had a bony carapace on their backs to provide solid protection, but they were not without weaknesses. Their weakness was under their abdomens. Most insects had no carapace protection on their abdomens, including the dogs and insects. When Lu Yi was entangled with them at the mountain pass earlier, he had exploited this weakness many times and killed 2 of them. Nevertheless, the dogs and insects were too agile, so it was difficult to kill them most of the time. Li Taibai's doppelganger had timed his sneak attack perfectly. Coupled with the sword cultivator's terrifying burst of power, he killed 2 of the dogs and insects in one fell swoop. The third dog managed to escape. It was not that the doppelganger's sword control was not good, but that the dog and insect reacted too quickly. When it sensed that something was wrong, it immediately changed directions, causing the sword dragon that was aimed at it to hit empty air. The 3 sword dragons suddenly scattered and turned into countless sword lights, which went toward the remaining dogs and insects from behind, forcing them to scatter. The moment the doppelganger made a move, Yangming's main body also turned around. The fiery red wings on his back spread out, and with the support of wind travel, his speed was raised to the limit in an instant. In a flash, he arrived in front of the nearest dog and unsheathed his mountain saber to stab at the dog's ferocious mouth. The dog and insect were still dodging the doppelganger's sword lights. Who would have thought that the human who was being chased so pathetically by them would suddenly attack? If 2 different cultivators worked together, no matter how telepathic they would not be able to coordinate so flawlessly. However, there was no such problem when the main body and the doppelganger worked together. After all, regardless of whether it was Wuxia or Li Taibai, they were all the same person. 7 The mountain saber stabbed over, and the dog and insect could not dodge at all. The saber pierced through its mouth and into its viscera. The thorny spiritual inscriptions were activated. Lu Yi twisted the saber in his hand and cut open the dog and insect's body. Lu Yi retracted his saber and slashed down. The huge impact caused the dog and insect to immediately fall down. In midair, its blood and broken viscera scattered, and its life was quickly extinguished. In just a few breaths' time, 3 of the 8 dogs and insects had been killed. There were only 5 left. This was the advantage of a sneak attack. In a normal fight, one would not be able to kill so many in such a short time. The earth-shattering sword lights were still attacking from below, forcing the dog and insect to dodge. Although the sword lights were sharp, it was difficult for them to gain anything. Yangming's main body held his saber and attacked another dog and insect, forcing it to hastily meet the attack head-on. 2. Chapter 1084. Although Lu Ye's attacks were fierce, the dog bugs were still big bugs. The white bone carapace on their backs was extremely sturdy. Even if the Pan Shan saber slashed on it, it could only leave a mark and not damage its foundation. It was hard to take its life in a short time. On the contrary, the dog bugs kept biting him, making him look like he was in danger. Another 2 dogs recovered from the surprise attack and flanked Lu Yi from the left and right, while the remaining 2 flew towards the direction of the fissure, searching for traces of the doppelganger. They also knew that in this kind of battle, they could not expose their weak abdomen to the enemy. Therefore, the doppelganger hidden in the fissure was a threat. Without any other choice, the doppelganger could only rush out from the fissure. Many sword lights surrounded it as it rushed towards the main body. Activating the sword chi and using the book sword technique, it broke through the obstruction of the 2 dog bugs and successfully met up with the main body. In an instant, the aura of the main body and the doppelganger merged and linked up to form a formation. If ordinary cultivators wanted to form a formation, they would need to have a tacit understanding and be familiar with each other. Moreover, they would need to practice for a long time or use the twin chi-linked branches formation disc. However, it was too easy for the main body and the doppelganger to form a formation. They were originally one body, so there was no need for any external help. Their aura soared. The 2 of them faced the 5 dog bugs head-on, and were not at a disadvantage. For a moment, the saber lights and sword lights were dazzling. The situation in the Dark Moon Forest Pass had completely stabilized. There was no need for Lin Yu to do anything anymore. All that was left was to clean up the mess. The stupid bugs only knew how to attack and not retreat. The cultivators in the pass only needed to fight steadily and surely to kill the rest of the bugs. She was worried about Li Taibai's safety, so she rushed out and looked around. At the same time, she kept sending messages, but she still did not get a response. At the same time, outside the pass, Elder Wan's voice sounded. "I'll leave the rest to you. I'll go find Wuxia." Using spells to open a path, He rushed out of the bugs and rushed out. Lu Ye had lured all the bugs away and had not returned yet. The situation must not be good. So he had to go and help. As for the pass, it was no longer a big problem. The remaining bugs were just moving battle achievements for the soldiers at the pass, so they could be dealt with by the soldiers. One in the north and one in the south, 2 camps and 2 mountain passes. 2 silhouettes set off at almost the same time, rushing towards the direction of the fissure. A moment later, Elder One sensed a violent spiritual energy fluctuation coming from the front. It was obvious that someone was fighting over there, and it was in full swing. He immediately sped up and soon saw the battlefield. In midair, 2 silhouettes were moving back and forth. One of them was holding a saber that emitted a piercingly cold saber light, while the other was riding a sword that emitted sword chi. They attacked from afar and fought in close combat. Their teamwork brought out the best of each other, and they had incomparable tacit understanding. In the sky, there was a slowly rotating river of sword chi that was constantly shrinking, sealing off the space where the giant insects could move. When Elder One rushed over, he saw the man wielding the saber slashing down and slashing a dog bug in the air. The bug's blood splattered across the sky, and the visual impact was extremely shocking. Even though he had never seen him before, Elder One recognized the youth with a single glance as Lu Ye. This was because Lu Ye was a weapon cultivator who used a saber. Furthermore, he always had a white tiger beast by his side. This was consistent with some of the information he had received in the past. Elder One secretly sighed. As expected of a character who could stir up a storm in the Spirit Stream and Cloud River realms. Even though he had been silent for a few years in the True Lake realm, he still had an extremely huge heritage. He had actually killed such a giant insect just like that. The power of that saber strike was not something a second-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator could produce. What made him a little suspicious was that this sword cultivator had never seen or heard of him before. However, his ability to ride a sword was extremely amazing. What was even rarer was that he actually cooperated so skillfully with Lu Ye. This kind of cooperation could only appear between people who were extremely close to each other, or they could use the twin chi-linked spirit array. Just as he was thinking this, Elder One suddenly raised his eyes and looked into the distance. In that direction, a stream of light was rapidly approaching, accompanied by an extremely clear aura of a 7th-order Divine Sea Realm. Soon, a graceful figure appeared in Elder One's field of vision. At the same time, Lu Yue also saw Elder One. The two of them, one from the south and one from the north, looked at each other for a moment, then at the same time looked at the fierce battlefield. They both understood what was going on. Almost at the same time, the two of them stopped and stood still only a few thousand feet away from the battlefield. They did not rush forward and secretly circulated their spirit chi. At this moment, Elder One could tell that the young sword cultivator was not a cultivator from Grand Heaven Alliance, but from Myriad Demon Ridge. Otherwise, Lin Yu would not have rushed over. So, it should be that Lu Ye led these giant insects to meet this sword cultivator by chance, and the other party helped him. But if that was the case, how could he cooperate with Lu Ye so skillfully? Elder One could not understand, but it did not prevent him from accurately inferring the current situation. These two young people cooperated with each other to kill the giant insects. The scene seemed thrilling, but in fact, the situation was under control. The two of them should not have to worry about their lives. As for whether they could kill the remaining giant insects, it would depend on their methods. At this time, others should not rashly intervene, especially under the premise that Lin Yu was nearby. If they rashly intervened, it would inevitably ruin the cooperation between the two young people and easily cause Lin Yu to misunderstand. Many thoughts flashed through Elder Wan's mind, and at this moment, Lin Yu's heart was also in turmoil. Elder One did not know Li Taibai, but she knew Lu Ye. She did not expect that Lu Ye would actually appear here and cooperate with Li Taibai to kill the insects. Moreover, Lu Ye's performance in the battle was clearly not weaker than Li Taibai's, and the two young people's cultivation were equally matched. In other words, if the two of them were to fight one-on-one, it was hard to say who would win. Lin Yu was a little dazed. She had thought that Lu Ye did not have enough strength and had disappeared. In the future, Jiuzhou would be the place where Li Taibai would become famous. But now it seemed that the situation was not what she thought at all. Wuxia was still Wuxia, and he was still so dazzling. What Elder One thought of she naturally thought of as well. That was why she and Elder One stopped outside the battlefield at the same time. Fellow Taoist Lin, long time no see. Elder One's voice sounded in her ear. Although the two of them were not familiar with each other, they had seen each other several times, so they recognized each other. Fellow Taoist Wan, Lin Yu replied. I have to congratulate fellow Taoist Lin for having such a talent under your command. I wonder what this young man's name is, and where did he learn from? Lin Yu frowned. She did not want to reveal Li Taibai's background, but on second thought, a person like Li Taibai would become famous in Jiuzhou sooner or later, and it was impossible to hide it, unless she did not let him appear in front of others in the future. She said generously, Li Taibai. As for his master, he is just a rogue cultivator, not from a famous sect. A rogue cultivator? Elder One was shocked. He thought that this young sword cultivator was a talent secretly cultivated by a top sect in Wanmo Ridge, but he did not expect him to be a rogue cultivator. He did not think that Lin Yu would lie to him about this kind of thing, so if she said that Li Taibai was a rogue cultivator, then he must be a rogue cultivator. Although it was not easy for rogue cultivators to cultivate, it did not mean that they did not have great achievements. There were still some top experts in the history of Jiuzhou who were rogue cultivators, and these rogue cultivators all obtained great opportunities and mysterious inheritances. Therefore, although they were not from famous sects, they still had some background in terms of their master. Young people nowadays are really amazing. Elder One sighed. These two people cooperate well. I think we should not disturb them, and just stay in the formation. Fellow Taoist Lin, what do you think? Although they had a tacit understanding, it was better to make some things clear. If it were a few years ago, in the face of such a situation, the two would definitely not have such an idea. They would have directly rushed into the battle. No matter what, they had to get rid of the other party's rising stars first. But now that the insect disaster had swept across Jiuzhou, the two camps had tacitly stopped their disputes. Even when cultivators met in the wild, sometimes they would sincerely cooperate. If the low-level cultivators had such awareness, how could the two of them, who were in the Divine Sea realm, not have such awareness? Lin Yu nodded and said, I also have the same idea. With the two of them by the side, even if Wuxia and Li Taibai did not do their best, these giant insects would not be able to escape. After finishing their discussion, the two of them turned their gazes towards the battlefield. What they saw shocked them once more, because in this short period of time, another giant insect was killed by the joint efforts of the two young people. This time, it was Li Taibai who attacked. The flexible flying sword drilled into the giant insect's abdomen and came out from its mouth, stirring up the insect's blood. Out of the 5 giant insects, only 3 remained. The balance of strength was tilted, and there was not much suspense in this battle. Lin Yu and Old Wan sighed more and more, because whether it was Wuxia or Li Taibai, the strength they showed was not something they should have at their level of cultivation. If it were 2 ordinary second-order Divine Sea Realm cultivators, they would have already died in such a situation. But the two of them were able to kill the giant insects one after another. Especially the cooperation between the two, it was simply pleasing to the eye. It was extremely straightforward, without the slightest hesitation. Whether it was Old Wan or Lin Yu, it was rare to see such cooperation. Another dozen breaths later, Wuxia was the first to strike. He swung his saber at one of the giant insects. In the blink of an eye, the saber light flashed and cut a deep wound on the giant insect's back. However, he did not take its life. Instead, he pulled out his saber and charged at another giant insect. The moment Wuxia pulled out his sword, the sword light in the sky suddenly condensed and turned into an astonishing sword strike that accurately cut into the wound on the giant insect's back. The giant insect's thick white bone carapace, which had been pierced by the saber, could no longer withstand the attack and was directly split in half. Without this layer of protection, the giant insect's body also split apart. Good. Elder One couldn't help but praise. This kind of flawless cooperation was also a visual feast for the spectators. Chapter 1085. Lin Yu also smiled. In terms of battle results, Li Taibai had already killed 2 dumb insects while Lu Ye had only killed 1. In this aspect, the 10,000 Demon Ridge was slightly better. There were only 2 insects left. Just as Lu Ye's clone was about to take them all down in one go, the 2 giant insects finally realized that something was wrong. Originally there were 8 of them chasing out, but now there were only 2 left. How were they going to fight? The insects didn't have much intelligence, so they couldn't think too much. At this time, they could only follow their instincts. After realizing that something was wrong, the 2 insects fled in 2 directions, one left and one right. Lu Ye's clone chased after 1 insect. At the same time, Elder Wan and Lin Yu also rushed out. Just now, the 2 young people had been working closely together, so they didn't want to disturb them. Now that the 2 had separated and the insects were showing signs of escaping, they naturally couldn't sit back and watch. Lu Ye's original body met up with Elder Wan, and his clone met up with Lin Yu. Their spiritual power surged. After a while, the original body's battle ended first. After all, Elder Wan's cultivation was higher than Lin Yu's, so he had an advantage in such a battle. Soon after, the clone also killed the last dumb insect. The battle ended. Lu Ye's original body sheathed his sword, and the clone's mini-sword lights spiraled into the sword gourd. The 2 turned around and looked at each other from hundreds of feet away. Lu Ye thought about what he should say in such a situation. If there were no outsiders, it would be fine. But the key was that the Divine Sea Realm cultivators and Lin Yu were present. It would be strange if he didn't say anything. After a while he slowly said, "You're very good." The clone grinned and replied, "You're good too." The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. It felt even stranger to praise himself so blatantly. But in the eyes of Elder Wan and Lin Yu, the 2 rising stars appreciated each other. For rising stars like Lu Ye and Li Taibai, it was undoubtedly a great fortune to have someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with them in the same generation. The road ahead was long, and the competition between 2 people was always better than one person being alone. Lu Ye saluted again. "Lu Ye of the Jade Blood Sect. Thank you for your help." The avatar returned the greeting. "Itinerant cultivator Li Taibai, it is our duty as cultivators to exterminate the insectoids. If there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely drink and chat with you." Sure. Lu Ye really didn't know what to say. Fortunately, Elder One reached out to stroke his beard and laughed. "It's good to be young." Lin Yu obviously felt the same way. She agreed and said, "Yes. Now that this matter is settled, I'll take my leave." Elder One said before turning around and flying towards the direction of the Shocking Waves Lake Pass. Lu Ye followed closely behind. On the other side, Lin Yu also called out to her doppelganger and rushed towards the Dark Moon Forest Pass. A woman's curiosity was extremely strong, and even a 7th-order Divine Sea cultivator like Lin Yu was no exception. On the way back she asked, "Junior brother used to know Lu Ye?" The clone hurriedly shook his head. "This is the first time I've seen it. You cooperated so well with him that I thought you 2 were already familiar with each other. It's probably because our temperaments are compatible." This was also true, so Lin Yu naturally didn't doubt it. In her opinion, Li Taibai had no need to deceive her. Moreover, Myriad Demon Ridge and Grand Heaven Alliance, how familiar could they be? The 2 of you have similar figures and average cultivations. When you stand together, you look like brothers. Lin Yu pursed her lips and chuckled. It was obvious that she was in a good mood. The clone secretly thought that they weren't just brothers, they were the same person. Lin Yu continued, "But junior brother is much more handsome than Lu Ye." On the main body's side, Elder One didn't have much to say. He simply asked about the previous situation, and Lu Ye picked up some things that could be said. By the time the 2 of them returned to Startling Waves Lake Pass, the battle here was already nearing its end. Many soldiers charged out of the pass and formed different formations under the effect of the Kindred Formation Disc, rapidly reaping the lives of the insectoids. Lu Ye and Elder One didn't have any intention of interfering. They just wandered around the battlefield to provide support allowing the soldiers to vent their fighting spirit. After half a day, all the insect race had been exterminated. Only then did the soldiers begin to clean up the battlefield and collect the corpses of their fallen companions. Lu Yi found Elder Wan and said, "Elder Wan, this matter is over. I should leave." He came out for two things only, but there were some hiccups along the way. Due to fate, he got involved in this insect tide. Now that everything was settled, there was no need to stay. Elder Wan was communicating with someone. Hearing this, he raised his hand and motioned for Lu Yi to not speak. Lu Yi stood quietly and waited. After a while, Elder Wan ended the communication and looked at Lu Yi. "The Shocking Waves Lake Pass is now without a leader. You need to stay here for the time being." Lu Yi was stunned. "With Elder Wan here, why do I need to stay here?" Elder Wan said, "I'm the UG protector. I'm not limited to a certain pass. This old master will go wherever he is needed. There are new tasks from above, so this old master needs to leave now. Then transfer some other Divine Sea Realm cultivators. I'm only a second-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator now. How can I stay here?" Elder Wan looked at him meaningfully. "Although your cultivation is low, your strength isn't weak. There's no need to be so modest. Moreover, there's a shortage of manpower everywhere right now. For the time being, we can't transfer anyone suitable to stay here. You can keep the position of Pass Master for now. If it were any other Divine Sea Realm cultivator, they might not have such prestige. So right now, you are the most suitable candidate. But I'm from the Law Division." Lu Yi still wanted to struggle. Staying at a pass wasn't a good thing. If he had a choice, he would rather choose the UG protector position. It would give him more freedom to move around. The Law Division is also part of the State Guard. I've already reported this matter to the State Guard. Someone from Department Lord Qian's side will go greet them. That's all. This old master has a task to attend to, so I'll take my leave first." As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Wan shot up into the sky and disappeared. Lu Yi watched him leave speechless. He didn't understand how the situation had developed to this point. Inexplicably, he had become the Pass Master. Although his clone was also the Pass Master, there was still Lin Yu above him, so he didn't have a say in everything. But the situation here at Shocking Waves Lake Pass was different. There was no one above him, so he was the Pass Master. Yu Huang hurriedly ran in front of him and cupped his fists. "This subordinate greets Sir Pass Master." Lu Yi didn't know where he had heard this news, but it was probably Elder Wan who had told him. "What's the matter?" Lu Yi asked. Yu Huang handed over a jade slip. "This is the number of casualties in this battle. Please take a look, sir." Lu Yi took it and scanned through it. This time, a group of people had died at Shocking Waves Lake Pass. There weren't many of them, only a few dozen. If it was in the past, this number of casualties wouldn't be a big deal for a mountain pass. But now, all the mountain passes were short of manpower, so this number of casualties wasn't small. Lu Yi didn't know how to deal with it, but thinking about what his clone had seen at Dark Moon Forest Pass, he said, "Find someone to transport the corpses back to Grand Sky City. Send out an obituary notice, and ask the sects and families behind them to take the corpses back." Yes. Yu Huang accepted the order and left. It didn't seem too difficult, Lu Yi thought. Suddenly, a message came from the battlefield imprint. He checked it and found that it was from Gan Wudong. He immediately scolded him. "Bastard, why didn't you stay in Grand Sky City? Why did you come to Shocking Waves Lake Pass?" Gan Wudong was furious. It wasn't easy for the Law Division to produce such a talented person. Last time at the Grand Council, even Military Supply Minister Chao Ye's request to conscript Lu Yi was rejected by him. But now, Lu Yi had come running to Shocking Waves Lake Pass, not putting him in his eyes at all. "I was bored sitting in seclusion, so I decided to take a walk. When I came here, I happened to encounter an insect tide, and decided to lend a hand." Lu Yi hurriedly replied, "Did you know Lu Yueme died?" Gan Wudong asked again. "I heard. How did she die?" "I wanted to ask you, did you kill her?" Gan Wudong's suspicions were normal. Back then, Lu Yueme had disregarded her status and bullied the weak to hunt down Lu Yi. At that time, he and the sect master had come to save her. With such grievances, Lu Yi had a motive to kill Lu Yueme. Senior must be joking. I'm just a second-order divine sea cultivator, while Lu Yueme is already a seventh order. How could I possibly kill her? You alone can't, but what if Li Taibai joins you? Senior also knows about Li Taibai. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. Old One really had a big mouth, spreading the news so quickly. But thinking about it, some things couldn't be hidden. And from Old One's perspective, there was no need to hide anything. Lu Yi was a second-order divine sea cultivator. And if he wanted to take charge of this mountain pass, he needed to have a decent battle record. I just found out, and I heard that Li Taibai has a grudge with Lu Yueme for killing his son. It had to be admitted that these divine sea realm cultivators with high status were very well informed, so it was no wonder Gan Wudong had such suspicions. Both Lu Ye and Li Taibai had great enmity with Lu Yueme, but both of them had the ability to kill enemies above their level. Adding on the fact that they were familiar with each other, it was still possible for them to kill Lu Yueme. On top of that, the timing of Lu Ye's appearance here was too coincidental, so Gan Wudong had no choice but to speculate. Senior, I'm really innocent. I don't know Li Taibai, and today was the first time we met. On top of that, he's from Myriad Demon Ridge, so how could I possibly associate myself with him? Lu Yueme's death was something Lu Yi couldn't admit to, even if he was facing Gan Wudong. As long as you believe it, Gan Wudong was too lazy to say anything more to him. But right now, you need to take charge of Shocking Waves Lake Pass. Who told you to show up at the right time and display such outstanding strength? Perhaps the Sioux Province Guard can transfer people to replace you, or perhaps they can't. In any case, there is one thing you need to remember. You are a member of the Law Division. No one can change that. The latest domain name of this site. Chapter 1086. After ending the conversation with Gan Wudong, Lu Yi frowned. Judging from the current situation, it seemed he couldn't run away from the task of guarding Shocking Waves Lake Pass. Just as Gan Wudong said, who told him to show up at the right time and display such extraordinary strength. Of course, Old Man One must have strongly recommended him. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for a second-order divine sea realm cultivator to guard such a large mountain pass alone. However, the personal recommendation of an 8th-order divine sea realm cultivator like Yu Ji Hu Jun had some weight. For Lu Yi, this wasn't too difficult to accept, it just depended on how he felt about it. Even if he were to return to Grand Sky City, he would continue to refine the explosive fire spirit rock and the twin spirit connection array disc. Even if he were to stay here, he would still need to refine them. Moreover, staying here was far away from the Emperor. No one would restrict him, and he would have more time. Considering this, staying at Shocking Waves Lake Pass seemed to be better than returning to Grand Sky City. Of course, how long he could stay here depended on how the State Guard's higher-ups mobilized their manpower. If the right people were mobilized, he might be able to leave quickly, but if not, he would have to stay here forever. This wasn't a big problem. The only thing that made Lu Yi a little wary was the speculation about Lu Yueme's death revealed in Gan Wudong's words. Gan Wudong might have just casually mentioned it, or maybe he really did have such a guess. But in the end, he really did kill Lu Yueme. If it weren't for the sudden explosion of the insect tide, he would have been able to escape quickly after killing Lu Yueme, and no one would have connected him to Lu Yueme's death. However, the outbreak of the insect tide made it impossible for him to ignore Shocking Waves Lake Pass, so he could only do his best to help. It turned out that if he hadn't arrived at Shocking Waves Lake Pass at the critical moment, the insect race really might have broken through. And if that had happened, the casualties would have been great. Gan Wudong was in a high position and could obtain information that many people couldn't, so he had such a guess. However, there was no direct evidence for this kind of thing. And for Gan Wudong, even if Lu Yueme really died at Lu Ye's hands, so what? But in the end, this kind of guess was just a beginning. If Gan Wudong could have such a guess, it meant that others might also have such a guess. For example, the higher-ups of Heavenly Yuan sect, or the masters close to Lu Yueme, they had to be on guard against such things. However, in the end, as long as Lu Yi didn't admit it, no one could do anything to him. A second-order Divine Sea Realm, killing a seventh-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator, was nothing more than a pipe dream. So guesses could only remain guesses. What he didn't know was that at this very moment, an old woman was rushing towards Shocking Waves Lake aggressively from the direction of Heaven's Gate. The old woman was Yu Huajin, an elder of the Heaven Yuan sect and Lu Yuemei's mother-in-law. Although she was old and her figure was slightly hunched, she was still a true ninth-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator. A few years ago, she didn't look this old, but she had suffered a huge blow a few years ago that had left her physically and mentally exhausted, greatly damaging her vitality. That blow came from the end of the family's only bloodline. Speaking of which, the fate of her life was extremely tragic. Not long after they got married, her husband died. It wasn't that he was killed by someone, but that he failed to break through to the Divine Sea Realm, causing his soul to be damaged and his spiritual energy to become chaotic. She was widowed at a young age, but fortunately, she had a son in her belly at that time. After giving birth to him, she worked hard to raise him and had some achievements. She had hoped that her son would become famous in the 9 provinces and strengthen the prestige of her clan. But because he didn't follow orders, he was killed by that damn Feng Wujiang. When the news came, Yu Huajin almost went crazy, but she knew the gap in strength between her and Feng Wujiang. She also knew the glory of the Blue Blood sect, so she could only bury the bitterness and hatred in her heart. Her son was dead, but there was still her grandson. Her grandson's aptitude was not bad, and he was worth cultivating. In order to avoid any accidents during his growth, she deliberately placed him in Shocking Waves Lake Pass under Heaven's Gate. After all, the owner of Shocking Waves Lake Pass was her grandson's biological mother, so it was convenient for her to take care of him. However, the heavens didn't fulfill her wishes. A few years ago, her poor grandson was actually killed. Although the murderer soon received the retribution he deserved, the dead could not be brought back to life. The Tan family's bloodline was cut off, and in the entire Tan family, only she and her daughter-in-law, 2 widows with different surnames, were left. It was also that blow that greatly damaged Yu Huajin's vitality, causing her to fall ill. After her injury was healed, although she still had a 9th-order Divine Sea cultivation, anyone with discerning eyes could see that her vitality was slipping. If she really fought someone, it would be difficult for her to display the strength of a 9th-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator. This kind of thing only happened to those Divine Sea Realm cultivators, who had lived for many years. Because they grew older and their lifespan was approaching, their foundation would weaken, making it difficult for them to display their full strength. But this shouldn't have happened to Yu Huajin, because in terms of age, she was far from reaching the point where her strength would decline. Since the death of her grandson, Yu Huajin and her daughter-in-law rarely contacted each other, because every time they did, the scars in their hearts would be reopened, making them feel so much pain that they wished they were dead. As a result, just yesterday, she received news of her daughter-in-law's death. Her husband was dead, her son was dead, her grandson was dead, and now even her daughter-in-law was dead. But she, this damned old woman, was still alive in this world. Yu Huajin once wondered if her fate was too strong, so everyone related to her would die because of her. She didn't know how her daughter-in-law died, nor did she know who killed her, so even if she wanted to take revenge, she was powerless. However, in the end, some news had reached her ears. Even though she knew it was unlikely, she really needed to vent at a time like this. Thus, she left Heaven's Gate and headed straight for Shocking Waves Lake. She was afraid that if she was late, that person would have left. Evidence. She was an old woman who was about to die. What evidence did she need? As long as there was suspicion, it was enough. First, she would go to Shocking Waves Lake Pass to kill Wuxia. Then go to Dark Moon Forest Pass to kill Li Taibai. Even if her strength had declined, she was still a 9th-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator. Someone blocked the road ahead. Yu Huajin stopped, her face gloomy. The man glanced at Yu Huajin and sighed slightly. Sure enough. Why is Senior Brother Zhao here? Yu Huajin asked. The person who came was an acquaintance of hers, a member of Heavenly Yuan sect. He was now an elder of Grand Sky City's elder group, and could be said to be in a high position. Moreover, The two of them weren't just senior brother and junior sister of the same sect. When they were young, this senior brother Zhao was quite affectionate to her. After her husband died, senior brother Zhao took care of her for many years, but as they grew older, they naturally separated. After all, that relationship couldn't see the light of day, even though many people in Heavenly Yuan sect were well aware of it. Zhao Chen looked at Yu Huajin with a complicated expression. He could only sigh at the fact that the flower of heavenly origin had aged so quickly. It was truly a pity. Although he was also old and slightly old, he wasn't as old as Yu Huajin. He knew in his heart that this junior sister of his had suffered too many blows over the years and had been too depressed. Yu Huajin suddenly realized something, and her expression turned cold. Senior brother, are you here to stop me? Zhao Chen sighed. Junior sister, Luia can't be touched. When he received some news, he immediately understood that Yu Huajin would do something drastic, so he deliberately waited here. Now it seemed that his worries had come true. If there was anyone in this world who knew Yu Huajin the best, it was none other than him. Why? Yu Huajin looked at Zhao Chen puzzledly. What is senior brother's relationship with Luia that you want to protect him? Zhao Chen said. I have nothing to do with that young man. Junior sister, don't misunderstand. It's just that this boy is now too important, so I can't touch him. He's just a rising star, who has just entered the Divine Sea stage. What's so important about him that I can't touch him? Zhao Chen knew that if he didn't give Yu Huajin an explanation today, it would be impossible to stop her, so he could only tell the truth. Has Heaven's Gate recently transferred a batch of explosive fire spirit stones and twin chi-connected array discs over? Yu Huajin didn't know why Zhao Chen suddenly mentioned this, but she still responded patiently. Yes. Not to mention the explosive fire spirit stones. What does junior sister think about the twin chi-connected array discs? It is indeed a strange object. With that array disc, it can increase the strength of the soldiers by 30% out of thin air. Yu Huajin replied, and suddenly realized. Senior brother means that these two things are related to Luia? He can't be the one who refined them, right? Zhao Chen secretly thought that his junior sister was not too stupid. He nodded and said, It is he who refined them. This is a confidential matter. Only the people in the Great Council know about it. Deputy Leader Pang has also issued a gag order, so outsiders have not heard about it. So junior sister should know that in this situation, he can't be touched no matter what. Yu Huajin couldn't believe it. Not to mention the explosive fire spirit stones. This thing had been available for a few years, but the supply had been cut off for a while. However, the twin chi-connected array discs were indeed recognized as good things. When she saw the array disc before, she had guessed which master refiner this thing came from. She had also secretly inquired about it, but there was no conclusive information. In the end, it was actually refined by Luia. When these words came from Zhao Chen's mouth, Yu Huajin did not have any doubts. For a moment, she was absent-minded. A bone-chilling chill suddenly enveloped her body. Yu Huajin was shocked and unable to react. Zhao Chen also did not notice, until a trace of spirit chi suddenly erupted. Zhao Chen's face changed drastically, and he rushed forward. But in the next moment, he froze in place and stared in horror behind Yu Huajin. Yu Huajin's whole body stiffened. Because of the severe pain, even Zhu Long's figure straightened a little. She stared fixedly at the tip of the sword that had pierced through her chest, unable to accept that she, a ninth-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator, had been sneak attacked without anyone noticing. With her divine sense, she suddenly noticed the familiar aura behind her. Gritting her teeth, she shouted, "Thought Moon immortal." After dealing with this woman for so many years, and repeatedly suffering losses at her hands, Yu Huajin instantly recognized her aura even without seeing her face. Zhao Chen also shouted at the same time, "Fellow Taoist Nian, please show mercy." Chapter 1087. Although the tip of the sword was aimed at the heart, it was slightly lower. Therefore it did not go for the vital part. This meant that Nian Yuxian had no intention of killing Yu Huajin. Otherwise, Yu Huajin would have died under the attack just now. This gave Zhao Chen a glimmer of hope. He hurriedly pleaded for mercy. At the same time, He was shocked by Nian Yuxian's audacity. Whether it was the Haotian alliance or the Wanmo Ridge, there were internal conflicts. However, these conflicts were basically confined to the shadows and would never be shown on the surface. After all, each of them had their own rules. Moreover, the cultivators of the Spirit Sea realm had to care about each other's reputation. There was only one exception, and that was Nian Yuxian. Over the years, she had attacked Yu Huajin in public more than once, and she had also caused Yu Huajin to suffer losses. In the past, Yu Huajin had suffered losses, but at most, she was in a sorry state. But this time it was obviously different. With such a sneak attack and such injuries, she could have died if she was not careful. If Yu Huajin really died here, then Nian Yuxian would not be able to escape the punishment of the Wei rules. Would she care? Zhao Chen really did not know. Ever since Feng Wujiang died in battle, this woman's actions were hard to predict. Otherwise, she would not have such a great reputation of being able to suppress a mountain pass alone. At this moment, Nian Yuxian was completely behind Yu Huajin, leaving no trace. The willow catkin short sword pierced through Yu Huajin's back and out of her heart. The spiritual power vibrated continuously, causing Yu Huajin's face to twist in pain. However, she did not dare to move at all because the cold, murderous intent behind her made her feel cold all over. After cultivating for so many years, she had been injured countless times. However, this was the closest she had ever been to death. Life or death, it was just a thought from the other party. A breeze blew, and the smell of blood drifted. Nian Yuxian said softly, "You had thoughts that you shouldn't have. This sword is a lesson for now. In the future, if I find you within 100 miles of Wuxia, I will take your life." It was just a simple explanation without any harsh words. But Yu Huajin knew that this woman could really do such a thing. She gritted her teeth and did not say anything. Her face was full of humiliation and unwillingness. Nian Yuxian did not want her to answer. After she finished speaking, she pulled out her sword and kicked Yu Huajin in the back. Yu Huajin's body was knocked forward. Zhao Chen quickly caught her and looked up. In his field of vision, there was only a stream of light that was rapidly disappearing into the distance. "Junior sister, how are you?" Zhao Chen hurriedly asked. Yu Huajin opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her neck tilted and she stopped moving. Zhao Chen was shocked and hurriedly investigated, discovering that Yu Huajin wasn't dead, but had simply fainted due to anger. Zhao Chen guessed that she had been humiliated. She was a dignified 9th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivator. Yet she had been attacked and threatened, without any means to counterattack. How could the proud and arrogant Yu Huajin possibly accept this? Her injuries were not optimistic. Clearly, the Thought Moon Immortal had done something after stabbing her. It looked like a simple piercing wound, but her internal organs were in a mess. Even if Yu Huajin had been at her peak, it would have taken her at least 2 months to recover from such an injury, let alone now that her qi and blood had dropped. He was no longer the same as before. Her life was indeed not in danger, but it would take her at least half a year to recover from such an injury. Zhao Chen sighed in his heart. Although Nian Yuxian had gone a bit overboard, this matter really couldn't be blamed on her. Just as Nian Yuxian had said, this strong-willed junior apprentice sister had thoughts that she shouldn't have. Naturally, she had to teach her a lesson. Although he could persuade her once, it was impossible for him to keep an eye on Yu Huajin. With his understanding of her, even if he managed to persuade her to go back this time, she would still find another opportunity. To some extent, this might be the best outcome. In the current situation, Wuxia absolutely could not be touched. If he really did, no one would be able to save Yu Huajin. Just like how the Thought Moon Immortal would not really kill Yu Huajin. If she really did, there would be no place for her in the vast Grand Heaven Alliance. Today's matter would end here. Yu Huajin had suffered a loss in silence. She would not spread it around, and she would keep her mouth shut. She believed that the Thought Moon Immortal would not mention it to anyone. Carrying Yu Huajin and urging his spiritual power to help her suppress her injuries, Zhao Chen flew into the air. He still had to find a medical cultivator. Dozens of miles away, the Thought Moon Immortal, who had hidden herself, watched this scene quietly. After Zhao Chen disappeared from her sight, she sent a message. persuaded her to go back. In Grand Heaven City, Tang Yifeng looked at the message from the Thought Moon Immortal, and the corner of his eyes twitched slightly. Although the Thought Moon Immortal used the word persuade, he understood that the Thought Moon Immortal would not use such a gentle method. The other party's way of persuading her to go back should be very fierce. Lu Yi appeared at the Shocking Waves Lake Pass to help the soldiers guarding the pass. He also worked together with Li Taibai of the Myriad Devil Ridge to kill the big worm. All of them displayed an extremely impressive foundation and strength. After that, he was strongly recommended by Elder Wan to temporarily stay at the pass to guard it. However, at this time, the original Shocking Waves Lake Pass's lord, Lu Yuemei, died mysteriously. Whether it was Lu Yi or Li Taibai, both of them had a grudge against Lu Yuemei. When all the information was put together, it was very fanciful. Gan Wudong had asked Lu Yi about Yu Huajin rushing to the Shocking Waves Lake Pass from Heaven's Gate. It was the same for Zhao Chen. In order to prevent Yu Huajin from making a big mistake, he deliberately came to stop her. How could the sect master not do anything? He could not leave Grand Heaven City for the time being, so he could only send a message to the Thought Moon Immortal and thank her for making the trip. Looking at it now, the result was not bad. Lu Yi was completely unaware of these undercurrents. This was the benefit of having someone protecting him from above. There were many hidden dangers that even if he didn't notice, his seniors could still nip them in the bud without anyone noticing. He was very busy now. After the battle, the pass was devastated. Many things had to be dealt with, and they also needed him, the pass master, to make the final decision. Although he had not experienced this, the Dark Moon Forest Pass was experiencing the same thing. With a clone there to observe, he only needed to learn from Lin Yu. Therefore, although it was his first time being the master of a pass, he did things in an orderly manner. He was experienced and prudent. The soldiers below saw this, and were quite pleased. After a few days, the post-battle matters at the pass were almost settled. In the main hall, Lu Yi sat upright while Yu Huang and a few other Ninth-Order True Lake Realm cultivators stood to the side and reported various things. Lu Yi had a headache listening to them and interrupted them. When the Willow Pass Master was still alive, how did these things be dealt with? He did not believe that Lu Yuemei would personally take care of these big and small matters. If she really did that, how would he have the time to deal with them? Yu Huang replied, "We also helped to deal with them. After dealing with them, we asked the Willow Pass Master to review and make the final decision." Lu Yi said, "Then it will be the same as before. How it was before, how it will be in the future. Unless there is something that I have to deal with, there is no need to ask me." Yu Huang and the others looked at each other and respectfully acknowledged. They had a rough understanding of Lu Ye's temperament. It seemed that this newly appointed young Mountain Pass Lord was not the kind of person who was obsessed with power and authority. At the very least, in terms of familiarity with the Mountain Pass, Lu Yi could not compare to them. It would be better for them to handle many things. Following that, Yu Huang took out a jade slip and said, "However, my lord, the resources at the Mountain Pass will need to be personally transferred from Grand Heaven City. The resources used by cultivators for cultivation can be purchased from the Tianji Treasure House with merit points. However, the public resources at the pass will need to be transferred by the state guards. Other things aside, there were so many defensive fortifications that needed to be repaired. The damaged spirit arrays and the spirit artifacts placed in the array cores could not be paid by the soldiers themselves. It did not make sense. This required Lu Yi to personally apply for it from Grand Sky City. The others did not have the authority to do so. Lu Yi took the list and checked it. He frowned slightly. Isn't this a little too little? Although he did not know how many resources were needed at the pass, the list was very short. The types and quantities listed on the list were not many. Yu Huang said, "It is a little too little, but it should be enough." "How can that be? We need to be a little wealthy to be able to deal with some unexpected situations." Lu Yi threw the jade scroll back. "Add some more things. Triple, no quintuple." The few true lake stage cultivators looked at him in shock. This was still applying for resources? This was robbery. Yu Huang said carefully, My lord, it's like this. Now that there are frequent battles, all the passes are short on resources. Even if we apply like this, the state guards may not be able to provide it. So what if the state guards do not give it to them? In the end, he still ended up losing face. Also, there was something that Yu Huang did not tell Lu Yi. That was when Lu Yuemei was alive, she also applied like this. However, because Lu Yuemei had connections at Heaven's Gate, she could often use her private authority to obtain some subsidies from Heaven's Gate. Lu Ye's cultivation level was much lower than Lu Yuemei's. He did not have any connections at Heaven's Gate. It was already good enough that the resources applied for in the Jade Scroll were approved. How could he expect more? Lu Yi said, "This is like doing business. We raise the price and the other side will pay. Whether we apply or not is our business." Yu Huang and the others looked at each other. This was the first time they heard of Yanluan. They were speechless for a moment. "Is there anything else?" Lu Yi asked. Everyone shook their heads. Originally, there were many things that needed to be reported. However, since Lu Yi had said that, and was willing to give up his authority, there was no need to report anymore. They could handle it themselves. Then that's it. You may leave. Lu Yi waved his hand, and the few of them left respectfully. Walking out of the hall, someone asked worriedly, "Brother Yu, this list of resources, are we really going to follow the past lord's idea?" Yu Huang said, "Since my lord has said so, we can only follow his idea." The person said, "I'm just afraid that we won't be able to approve it. When that happens, it will definitely delay the repair of the fortifications." The military supply department is full of Paixio. They won't be easy to talk to. If we really leave a bad impression on them, it will be troublesome to apply for resources in the future. Chapter 1088. After all, this was the new past master's first order. They couldn't refute it, and could only follow his instructions. However, in their opinion, the new past master was going to be rejected. How could it be so easy to apply for supplies from the quartermaster division? Even if there were no wars in the past, every application for supplies would be discounted, not to mention now that there were wars everywhere. This was good too. It would allow the new past master to adapt to the quartermaster division's style faster. He wouldn't be so rash in the future. It was a good thing to be young and impetuous, but one had to conform to the general trend. Thus, they hurriedly drafted a new list and reported it to Lu Yi. Through Lu Ye's request, it was passed to the quartermaster division in Vast Sky City. Next, they just had to wait. No matter how fast the supplies were delivered, it would still take some time. If it was in the past, just the approval process alone would take several days. Those guys in the quartermaster division had always been known for being stingy. They couldn't wait to keep everything in the treasury. In the inner hall of Lu Ye's quarters, a golden vortex slowly rotated. Yi and Hupo's figures were immersed in rich and pure spiritual power as they cultivated. In the 2 years that Lu Yi wasn't around, the two of them relied on Yi's battle merits to cultivate. Occasionally, they would receive some assistance from the sect master. This was how they were able to maintain a steady improvement in their strength. Now that Lu Yi had returned, they didn't have to worry about the golden spirit lot anymore. Lu Yi now had so much battle merits that he couldn't spend them all. The golden spirit lot could be maintained at all times, allowing the spirit and tiger to cultivate to their heart's content and improve themselves. Since the beginning, Yi and Hupa had been inseparable from him. It was easy for him to improve his cultivation now. Their strength was constantly increasing, so Yi and Hupo's cultivation had to improve as soon as possible. Otherwise, one day, the spirit and tiger wouldn't be able to keep up with his progress. Lu Yi didn't cultivate. Instead, he set up a transportation array. At the same time, over at the Dark Moon Forest Pass, his clone was doing the same thing. It had been a long time since he set up a transportation array. Lu Yi wasn't sure how far his array could reach with his current cultivation. If it couldn't reach 1,000 miles, then the array wouldn't be effective. Because the two arrays couldn't be connected, it naturally couldn't be used. If it could be achieved, then many things would become simple in the future. Not to mention other things, he was now shouldering the task of refining the explosive fire spirit rock and the twin Qi-link branches array disk. How could the efficiency of refining by himself be higher than the efficiency of refining by himself and his doppelgangers? If this was the case, then the efficiency of refining explosive fire spirit stones and array disks would increase exponentially. Moreover, when he advanced in the future, he wouldn't have to find a place to meet up in the wild. It would save him some time on the road, and he wouldn't have to worry about being followed and attacked by some fellows with ill intentions. Just like a few days ago, if he had used the teleportation formation to send his doppelganger directly to his main body, Lu Yuemei wouldn't have discovered his whereabouts, and she wouldn't have discovered the secret of his doppelganger. It was just that Lu Yi hadn't thought of this at the time. Furthermore, condensing a new clone wasn't too complicated a matter in the first place. In the end, Lu Yuemei had secretly followed him, causing all sorts of subsequent events. Although he hadn't set up a teleportation array for a long time, his skills weren't rusty. After a short while the two arrays were completed. If two different cultivators were to set up these magic arrays, they would naturally not be able to link the two magic arrays together. However, strictly speaking, the main body and the clone were the same person. Thus, there was no such concern when setting up two magic arrays. Now, it all depended on whether there was a problem with the distance. Lu Ye's main body urged the power of the array and spread out his divine sense. As the array hummed, the other array 1,000 kilometers away resonated with it. It works. Moreover, he felt that the distance between the two arrays wasn't the limit. In other words, with his current second-order Divine Sea Realm cultivation, the teleportation array he set up could cover more than 1,000 kilometers. As for how far the limit was, that would require some verification. Lu Ye's main body stood in the array and poured his spiritual energy into it. The space around him distorted, and he instantly disappeared. When his vision returned, he had already arrived at the residence of his doppelganger in Dark Moon Forest Pass. He pushed open the door and walked out leisurely. He wandered around Dark Moon Forest Pass. This place was also busy with the aftermath of the battle, but because Lin Yu was personally presiding over it, his doppelganger seemed to have nothing to do. Lu Yi followed Lin Yu's aura and flew to a section of the city wall. Lin Yu turned her head and smiled. "Junior brother Tai Bai." Lu Yi nodded and stood beside her, casually asking, "How is senior sister Lin's injury?" Lin Yu had been injured during the battle against the insect tide, but looking at her current condition, she should be fine. "It's just a minor injury," Lin Yu replied. "Junior brother has worked hard in the battle and should be resting more. Why did you run out here?" After the battle a few days ago when the doppelganger and the main body joined forces to kill the giant insect, Lin Yu obviously attached more importance to the doppelganger. Lu Yi opened his eyes as many comprehensions appeared in his mind. On a certain section of Shocking Waves Lake Pass's city wall, Yu Huang was doing his daily patrol. After several days of cleaning up, there were no longer any traces of the battle at the pass, but many of the fortifications still needed to be repaired. This couldn't be rushed. Just as he was about to finish, he suddenly sensed something and turned his head to look in a certain direction. Two streams of light were rapidly approaching, one of which had the aura of a fifth-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator. Yu Huang hurriedly looked over and soon understood who these people were. So fast. Thinking so, Yu Huang leapt out to meet them. A moment later, the two streams of light arrived in front of Yu Huang, revealing two figures. One of them was a familiar face, Manager Fu Yao of the Quartermaster Division, but Yu Huang didn't recognize the other. However, Fu Yao was only a true Lake Realm 8th Order cultivator and shouldered the heavy responsibility of transporting supplies to various mountain passes. At this time, it wasn't strange for a Divine Sea Realm cultivator to accompany him. Yu Huang just didn't know what position this Divine Sea Realm cultivator had been transferred from. "Manager Fu." Yu Huang cupped his fists and saluted. Although his cultivation was higher than the other parties, the people of the Quartermaster Division had always been arrogant and couldn't be neglected. Fu Yao nodded lightly and smiled. "So it's brother Yu, long time no see." Yu Huang was surprised because every time Manager Fu came to deliver supplies in the past, he had never given him any face. This had nothing to do with personal character, but rather with the people of the quartermaster division. No matter who it was, if they wanted to take something from the quartermaster division, they would have to show a cold face. This was what Manager Fu did, so there was nothing wrong with him. But today, he was greeting him with a smile. Did the sun rise from the west? Manager Fu must be tired from the journey, Yu Huang said carefully before turning to the Fifth Order Divine Sea Realm cultivator. This sir is, Fu Yao explained. Sir Lu was assigned by the State Guard to accompany me in transporting supplies. Yu Huang saluted again. The Divine Sea Realm cultivator surnamed Lu just nodded lightly and didn't say anything. Where's past Master Lu? Why don't I see him? Fu Yao asked. Yu Huang cursed in his heart. He had forgotten to inform his past master that the quartermaster had arrived. It was only reasonable for him to come out and greet him. If they had a good relationship, it would be easier for him to request supplies from the quartermaster division in the future. Thinking quickly, Yu Huang explained. Sir Past Master was too tired from the battle a few days ago and has been recuperating for the past few days. Please come inside, I'll go inform Sir Past Master. Fu Yao still smiled. That's indeed hard work. I'll have to trouble brother you to inform him. Yu Huang was amazed. He felt that Fu Yao's attitude today was a bit off, a bit too friendly. However, Yu Huang didn't know what the problem was, so he could only welcome them inside first, before heading to Lu Ye's room. Lu Yi, who was comprehending the third form of the tyrant saber, felt the barrier around him being touched and got up to open the door. Seeing Yu Huang standing outside, he asked, Is there a battle? Instinctively, he thought it was another insect attack. Yu Huang replied, It's not a battle. Someone from the quartermaster division is here. Website's latest domain name 1. Chapter 1089. Why did someone from the quartermaster department come? Lu Yi asked with a frown. He had been studying the third form of the tyrant saber technique for the past few days, and his mind was filled with that exquisite saber technique. His reaction was a little slow. Yu Huang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Didn't we request for supplies a few days ago, and someone from the quartermaster department came to deliver supplies? Only then did Lu Yi react. If that's the case, then you can deal with him. There's no need to report this to me. Yu Huang said, Sir, he came to our territory. As the past master, you have to come out and entertain him. It would be fine if the person didn't mention Lu Yi, but Manager Fu did mention Lu Yi just now. If Lu Yi didn't come out, it would be a little unreasonable. After all, he came to deliver things. Lu Yi didn't understand. Entertain what? He was here to guard the pass and protect the front line of the military province. The quartermaster department was in charge of the distribution and transportation of supplies. Everyone had their own duties. What was there to entertain? Yu Huang said with a bitter face, Sir, you don't know. The people from the quartermaster department are not to be offended. Lu Yi couldn't help but recall the time when he went to the quartermaster department with Qian Wudong's order to get supplies. He went to the quartermaster department twice in Haoyan City. Although they didn't deliberately make things difficult for him, they didn't treat him well either. It was as if he was going to cut off the flesh of the quartermaster department. He frowned and asked, What's wrong with him? Does he need to find some beautiful and fair female cultivators to accompany him? Yu Huang's expression was embarrassed. He explained, The people from the quartermaster department are not people who abuse their position for personal gain. They are just like this. As the saying goes, subordinates follow the example of their superiors. According to my understanding, this is the rule passed down by the quartermaster of the quartermaster department, Shu Yichao. Lu Yi frowned. Forget it. Let's go meet him. Yu Huang hurriedly led the way. He didn't forget to remind Lu Yi. There's one more thing that you should be prepared for. The supplies we applied for last time, regardless of the quantity or type, were all too large, so the quartermaster division definitely wouldn't approve all of them. This time, the supplies they brought might only be a small portion, but it's still enough for the mountain pass to use. Sir, please don't think that the quartermaster division is targeting us. The prefecture guards have a large family business, and the quartermaster division has the authority to manage the supplies. It's not easy for them either, so they have to be stingy in everything they do. Otherwise, if the gap widens and their family's assets are emptied, they won't be able to explain themselves to their superiors and subordinates. You're speaking up for them. Lu Yi laughed. Yu Huang sighed. Although it's said that one shouldn't meddle in politics when not in position, this humble one can more or less understand their way of doing things. As the saying goes, they don't smile when meeting people because they're afraid that someone has a close relationship with the people in the quartermaster department and will fill their own pockets. From a certain point of view, the people in the quartermaster department are a little despicable, but they are also people who are loyal to their duties. Lu Yi replied casually and quickly brought Yu Huang to the guest hall. At a glance, he saw the two sitting upright. When they saw Lu Yi arrive, the two stood up together. Lu Yi first cupped his fists to the Fifth Order Divine Sea Cultivator. Greetings, fellow Taoist Lu. He didn't know what the other party's name was, but he learned from Yu Huang that the other party's surname was Lu, and that he was the guard in charge sent by the quartermaster department this time. Although he wasn't in charge of this trip, the other party's cultivation was here, so Lu Yi naturally had no problem exchanging pleasantries with him first. The cultivator surnamed Lu looked Lu Yi up and down, and smiled with a warm expression. I've heard of fellow Taoist Lu's name a long time ago. Today, I finally get to meet you. The War Province's twin heroes are indeed talented. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment. What War Province's twin heroes? When did I get this title? Since they're the War Province's twin heroes, then who else is it? The cultivator surnamed Lu laughed. Fellow Taoist Lu might not know, but a few days ago, the matter of fellow Taoists working together with fellow Taoist Li Tai Bai of Myriad Demon Ridge to kill mini-giant insects has been spread out by Senior Brother Wan. Senior Brother Wan said that the battle that day made him feel relaxed and happy. He only felt that time was passing by, and that talents were emerging. The War Province's twin heroes are Li Tai Bai and Yu Yi. These twin heroes of the War Province are Senior Brother Wan's affirmation of fellow Taoist, and that person from Myriad Demon Ridge. Old Wan really has a big mouth. Lu Yi was speechless. However, when he thought about it carefully, the twin heroes of the War Province were much better than the sect exterminating Yi, and the three disasters of the Spirit Stream sect. He said modestly, Elder Wan, you're being too serious. There were many elements of luck in the battle that day, so it's not accurate. The cultivator surnamed Lu said with a smile, Fellow Taoist, don't be so modest. I've always been familiar with Senior Brother Wan, and I've also asked him about the scene that day. I thought that if I were in that situation, it would be difficult for me to perform. Just from this point alone, although fellow Taoist Lu's cultivation base is inferior to mine, if it's a life and death battle, I'm definitely not your opponent. Senior Brother Wan has a unique vision, and is very accurate in judging people. Since he said that the two of you are the twin heroes of the War Province, he naturally wouldn't be wrong. Otherwise, he wouldn't have strongly recommended fellow Taoist to be in charge of a pass. This time, I took the initiative to come here, because I wanted to see the demeanor of the rising talents of our War Province. Today I finally fulfilled my long-cherished wish. Since they spoke so politely, Lu Yi could only continue to be modest. Hundreds of barges and thousands of sails compete against each other. Who can say for sure when it comes to cultivation? I ran faster in the first part of the journey, but how would I know that fellow Taoist Lu wouldn't be able to sail in the second part of the journey? The cultivator surnamed Lu laughed and said, Then I'll take advantage of fellow Taoist's auspicious words. Lu Yi then looked at the other true lake stage cultivator. This must be Manager Fu. Fu Yao hurriedly saluted. Manager of the Military Supply Department, Fu Yao, greets past Lord Lu. As he spoke, he untied a large pile of storage pouches from his waist, and picked out a total of 5 of them. He then handed over 2 jade slips. One of them is the list of materials that the Military Supply Department approved for this Shocking Waves Lake Pass application. The other one is the list of materials that Manager Chow asked me to bring to fellow Taoist. I hope that past Lord Lu can check it in person and verify it before signing for it. Lu Yi nodded slightly and received the 2 jade slips. He first looked at the list of materials that had been applied for. After a while, he nodded his head without batting an eyelid. Following that, he checked the other list. As expected, it was a large amount of fire spirit stones and other materials for refining array discs. Yu Huang watched anxiously from the side, afraid that Lu Yi would fly into a rage because of the wrong number of materials. His worry was not without reason. Lu Yi's age was right, and he was in the prime of his youth. He would not be so tactful when doing things. If he really flew into a rage because of the wrong number of materials, he would offend the military supply department. In the future, if the Shocking Waves Lake Pass wanted to apply for any materials allocation, they would only see more cold faces. What comforted him was that Lu Yi did not show any signs of getting angry. After checking the list of materials, he nodded his head and said, "There are no problems. How do I sign for it?" Fu Yao smiled and said, "Pass Lord Lu only needs to leave your aura imprint in these 2 jade slips." Lu Yi did the same and returned the 2 jade slips to Fu Yao. Fu Yao took them and said, "Now, I can return to the military supply department to report. Pass Lord Lu. Before I left, Department Head Chow instructed me that if Pass Lord Lu needs anything in the future, please do not hesitate to inform the military supply department. Anything that can be allocated will be given priority to Pass Lord Lu's side." When he said this, Lu Yi did not have much of a reaction, but Yu Huang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. If he did not know this manager Fu, he would have suspected that the other party was from the military supply department. Since when were the people from the military supply department so easy to talk to? Even a stingy rooster would have its feathers plucked. In the beginning, even when Lu Yuemei was overseeing the Shocking Waves Lake Pass, she had not been able to build a good relationship with the people from the military supply department. Every time this manager Fu came to deliver materials, Lu Yuemei would personally accompany him to deliver the goods. However, this manager Fu had always had a business-like attitude. Although he did not give Lu Yuemei any face, he was truly unmoved by force or persuasion. After the goods were delivered, he would not stop for a moment and would immediately leave. What was going on today? This manager Fu had a smiling face from beginning to end, and now he actually said such words. He had never heard of Chao Yi having any relationship with the Jade Blood Sect. Furthermore, a person like Chao Yi would not do anything for personal gain. Then I will thank Department Head Chao in advance. Lu Yi was also confused. Originally, Yu Huang had told him many things in advance, and he had really thought that there would be a shortage of materials from the military supply department, and had already mentally prepared himself. But now, it seemed that this was not the case at all. Since this matter is over, we will take our leave first. Fu Yao spoke up. The 2 of you have had a hard journey. Why don't you rest here before leaving? Let me do my duty as a host. Fu Yao said, "We appreciate past Master Lu's kind intentions, but we have official business to attend to." He patted his waist, which was bulging with storage pouches. Other than the Shocking Waves Lake Pass, I still have 7 or 8 other passes to visit. The allocation of materials is very important, and this Fu does not dare to be negligent. Hearing him say this, Lu Yi did not insist, and extended his hand in invitation. "Then I will send the 2 of you off." A moment later, after Lu Yi had sent off Fu Yao and Fu Yao, he returned to the guest hall, and saw Yu Huang looking at him excitedly with several storage pouches in his hands. "My lord, what is your relationship with Department Head Chao?" "Chao Yi." Lu Yi shook his head. "I have only heard of him but never seen him." "Then why were all the materials we applied for approved?" Yu Huang held the storage pouches in his hands, and felt that they were heavy. He had been ordered to draw up the list of materials for the house application. He was very clear on how many types of materials there were, and how much weight each had. It could be said that he was completely asking for an exorbitant price, and did not expect the military supply department to approve at all. He even thought that the military supply department would definitely send someone to reprimand him. But now, they actually did not give the approval at all. And just now, Fu Yao's attitude towards Lu Yi was still the same. And he even said that department head Chow had ordered him to inform the military supply department if he had any needs in the future, and those that could be allocated would be prioritized at the Shocking Waves Lake Pass. After being at the pass for so many years, he had never seen the military supply department so considerate. This was the attitude of someone treating their own son. If not for the fact that Lu Yi was a man, Yu Huang would have suspected that he had some unspeakable relationship with Chao Yi. This site's newest domain name, 1. Chapter 1090. In the mortal world, food comes first. We're working hard to resist the insect wave here, so we naturally have to ensure the supply of supplies. What's wrong with that? Lu Yi stepped forward and put away the 2 storage bags containing the fire spirit stones and materials for refining the array disc. After thinking for a while, he asked, "Have you tabulated the names of those who died in the previous battle?" "Yes, the corpses have been transported back to Grand Sky City," Yu Huang replied. "Find a way to check if they have any relatives alive. If they do, the mountain pass will provide compensation." Yu Huang was stunned. Compensation? There was no such rule in the past. Although the soldiers were following orders to kill the enemy on the front lines, and there were many dangers, how could there be no risks in the cultivation of cultivators? While the cultivators were killing the enemy here, they were also earning cultivation resources for themselves. If they died in battle, it was because they were not strong enough and not lucky enough. Add this rule in the future. Anyway, the mountain pass won't run out of supplies. You can handle this personally. Yes, Yu Huang replied and bowed deeply. This humble one thanks the mountain pass master for his kindness. Lu Yi waved his hand and took the 2 storage bags. First, he went to the Tianji treasure house and exchanged a batch of golden spirit sticks from the War Merit Pavilion. Then, he returned to his room and cultivated with the help of the spirit sticks, while refining the exploding fire spirit stones and the twin chi connecting array disc. With the help of his clone at the Dark Moon Forest Pass, the efficiency was greatly improved. Many trivial matters at the mountain pass were handled by Yu Huang and the other 9th Order True Lake Realm cultivators, so there was no need to trouble Lu Yi. Only when the soldiers encountered some Spirit Sea Realm insects that they couldn't deal with would they send a message to him for support. The days passed peacefully, and 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. After 3 months of almost non-stop cultivation, Lu Ye's cultivation finally broke through to the 3rd Order Divine Sea Realm. He immediately recalled his clone and condensed a new one. Then he let the clone hang around in front of Lin Yu. Seeing that Li Tai Bai's cultivation had improved again, Lin Yu was naturally overjoyed and relied on him more. With the thorn in his heart, Lu Yi knew that he had to improve his cultivation as soon as possible. Last time, Jiuzhou Tianji had sent him to the blood refining realm, allowing him to see all kinds of things in the blood refining realm with his own eyes. Then, after the blood race had failed to besiege the Jade Blood Holy Land, Jiuzhou Tianji had sent him back. Obviously, Jiuzhou Tianji wanted him to improve his cultivation as soon as possible. Although Tianji wouldn't say anything and basically let Lu Yi figure it out himself, many things were traceable. For example, why did he send Lu Yi to the blood refining realm at that time? At that time, the blood race besieged the Jade Blood Holy Land. If it weren't for the twin spirit connecting array disc that Lu Yi contributed, the Holy Land would have been in danger. From this incident, it could be seen that Tianji of the 9 states was willing to protect the human race, regardless of whether it was in the 9 states or the blood refining realm. Therefore, before the next time the blood race besieged the Blue Blood Holy Land, he had to rush back. Not only did he have to go back alone, but he also had to bring a group of helpers with him. This way, he would have a chance to protect the Blue Blood Holy Land, the only pure land of the human race in the blood refining world. As for how he was going to return, there was no need for him to think about it. The mysteries of the heavens had their own plans. All he had to do was wait. However, the current situation in the 9 states was turbulent. If the insect plague wasn't eliminated, there would be endless disasters. There was a shortage of manpower everywhere. Where could he find extra helpers to bring back to the blood refining world? The best situation was naturally to solve the insect plague before he left for the blood-refining world. But could this really be done? Lu Yi had always adhered to the principle of doing his best and leaving the rest to heaven's will. No matter what, he had to do his best. 20 now, his main body was the master of Shocking Waves Lake Pass, and his clone was the Little Pass master of Dark Moon Forest Pass. It could be said that the land within 1,000 kilometers was almost under his control. Not to mention solving the insect plague in the 9 states. It was more important to solve the insect plague in the surrounding 1,000 kilometers first. After 3 months, Lu Yi walked out of his bedroom without Hupu and Yi. The spirit and tiger had been in retreat during this time. With the constant supply of golden spirit sticks, their cultivations had improved rapidly. With a sweep of his divine perception, he found Yu Huang's location. He gave him a few instructions and asked him to stay at the pass. Then, he soared into the sky and headed north. During these 3 months, when he was cultivating, he had a lot of considerations. He could try a few things. If he could succeed, even if he couldn't solve the insect plague here, stabilizing the situation would not be a problem. In that case, he could take more time to do his own things. Rushing all the way, he quickly arrived at the Dark Moon Forest Pass. He didn't have any intention to hide. Lin Yu sensed him and immediately went to the city wall of the pass. His clone Li Tai followed closely behind. Hovering in the air 1,000 feet away from the Dark Moon Forest Pass, Lu Yi glanced over. Although he felt uncomfortable, he still cupped his fists and bowed to his clone. Brother Tai. His clone returned the greeting. In the eyes of outsiders, the two of them had worked together to fight the enemy before. Now that the name of the 2 heroes of the military province had been spread out, it was natural for them to address each other in this way. If it were someone else who did this in public, they would have been immediately accused of colluding with the enemy. Lu Yi looked at Lin Yu. Lu Yi of the Shocking Waves Lake Pass greets fellow Taoist Lin. Lin Yu smiled and bowed. Fellow Taoist Lu, what business do you have here? I have something to discuss with fellow Taoist Lin and brother Tai. I wonder if you can come in? Lin Yu was startled and immediately nodded. Fellow Taoist Lu, please come in. Lu Yi didn't hesitate. Under the gaze of a group of Wanmo Ridge cultivators, he rushed into the Dark Moon Forest Pass. This was probably the first time a cultivator walked into the enemy's pass so openly since the confrontation between the 2 camps. Lin Yu sighed with emotion. Young people were really bold. If it was an old Divine Sea Realm cultivator of the Haotian Alliance, they would never walk in like this. But then again, because of the insect plague, the relationship between the 2 camps had eased a little. Moreover, the 2 camps were intimately interdependent. She really wouldn't have any bad intentions toward Lu Yi. After a short while in the guest hall, the host and the guest sat down. A female cultivator served tea and admired the legendary sect destroyer Ye's graceful bearing up close. Lu Yi took a sip of tea. Because his doppelganger had been under Lin Yu's command for half a year, he was quite familiar with her. He didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. Fellow Taoist Lin, our 2 camps are at the north and south ends of the pass, guarding the front line. Let's not talk about the conflicts in the pass for now. Those are the general trend, and we can't help it. Right now we only have a common enemy. Why don't we work together to fight the enemy? Lin Yu asked. How do we work together? The insect race within 1,000-mile radius basically crawled out from the crack in the middle of our camp. That's the source. So as long as we conceal the source, the insect plague within 1,000-mile radius will naturally be contained. If we can do that, the soldiers won't have to rush around to kill the insects. You, me, and brother Tai won't have to go around to support each other. It'll save us a lot of trouble. Lin Yu thought for a while. Fellow Taoist Lu, you mean to deploy troops to deal with the crack? That's right. Lu Yi nodded. That's a good idea. Lin Yu pursed her lips into a smile and said, Truth be told, the higher-ups of Myriad Demon City have considered this as well, but there were many obstacles in their implementation, so they could only give up in the end, and I'll have to ask fellow Taoist Lin to dispel the obstacles. First of all, our camps have been at odds with each other for many years. We both have our own grudges against each other. Now that the insect plague is sweeping through, the relationship between our camps has eased a little. Although no one has made it clear, if the cultivators of our two camps meet in the wild, most of them will just brush past each other without any disputes. However, this is only a coincidence. If we really deploy troops at the crack, the cultivators of our two camps will definitely go to war together. Neither camp will be missing. If we get along with each other day and night, it's hard to guarantee that there won't be any conflicts. Lu Yi nodded. This matter isn't difficult to solve. We just have to give our orders. I believe that the cultivators of our two camps are not people who can't differentiate between green and red. Lin Yu smiled. This matter is indeed easier to solve. However, if we really do that, how are we going to distribute the troops? My Shocking Waves Lake Pass has about 300 soldiers now. We can't possibly pull all of them to the crack. After all, some of them will have to stay behind to guard the pass. The distance between the crack and the pass is hundreds of miles. We don't have enough troops to begin with. Splitting the troops like this is a huge taboo. When the time comes, whether there's a crisis at the crack or at the pass, we won't be able to receive timely support. Lin Yu hurriedly said. What fellow Taoist Lin is thinking is there anything else? If there's a giant insect that the soldiers can't deal with at the crack, what should we do? At least we can stay behind to guard the pass. The other side of the crack doesn't have the geographical advantage of the pass. After all these considerations, although the current defense isn't satisfactory, it's the best way to ensure the safety of the soldiers. It's not rash to send troops to the crack. Lu Yi said, the current method does have its advantages, but it also has its disadvantages. There's no one monitoring the crack, so we won't know in time if a giant insect comes out of it. In the past few months, the soldiers have often encountered spirit sea realm insects in the wild. Although they can send a message to me to provide support, it still takes some time. Sometimes, if I'm late, the lives of the soldiers will be in danger. I don't know what the situation is at the pass, but over at the Shocking Waves Lake Pass, more than 10 people have died in the past 3 months. The situation at the Dark Moon Forest Pass is actually the same. The cultivators are in groups killing insects in the wild, but if they're unlucky and encounter something difficult to deal with, it's very dangerous. Even if Lin Yu goes to provide support as soon as she receives the news, sometimes she's too late. Back then, Ing Wuji's group was almost wiped out. If Lu Yi didn't show up in time, Lin Yu would only be able to collect their corpses when she arrived. Therefore, sending troops to the crack is the best way to deal with it. As for fellow Taoist Lin's concerns, I can set up a transportation formation at the Dark Moon Forest Pass that leads directly to the crack. This way, if there's danger over there, whether it's fellow Taoist or brother Tai Bai, you can rush over immediately. Also, if there's a transportation formation, the soldiers at the pass and the crack will be able to coordinate with each other. No matter which side is in danger, they'll be able to support each other at any time. The latest domain name of this website, 1. Chapter 1091. There's one more thing. As fellow Taoists mentioned, it's true that there are many defensive structures at the mountain pass, but we can set up mini formations at the fissures in the ground. This way, even if a giant insect really does appear, we can use the power of the formations to hold it back for a while. At that time, the 3 of us can go over to support at any time. Lu Yi spoke frankly and with assurance. He had studied all of the problems that Lin Yu mentioned. It was actually very simple to solve them. A transportation formation could perfectly solve most of Lin Yu's worries. In this world, Lu Yi was not the only one who could set up a transportation formation. There were many formation cultivators in the 9 regions, especially those in the Spirit Ocean realm. Although setting up a transportation formation was not easy for them, it was not difficult to accomplish. The reason why there was no precedent of 2 camps joining hands to set up a fissures in the ground was because there was no good communication bridge. Lu Yi alone, there were so many 9 cultivators, especially those in the Spirit Ocean realm. Although setting up a transportation formation was not easy for them, it was not difficult to accomplish. The reason why there was no precedent of two camps joining hands to set up a fissures in the ground was because there was no good communication bridge. Not every mountain pass master was like Lu Shi, who openly ran to the enemy's mountain pass and sat down to discuss things with the enemy's mountain pass master. Lu Yi felt that if this matter could be done, it would be a good start. With the precedent of the Shocking Waves Lake Pass and the Dark Moon Forest Pass joining hands to defend against the enemy, the other mountain passes could follow suit. At that time, the pressure on the front lines would be reduced by a lot, and the various state guards would be able to transfer more people to deal with the problems in their own territories. With this kind of snowball rolling, even if it did not completely solve the problem of the insect plague, stabilizing the situation would not be a problem at all. Lin Yu fell into deep thought. Lu Yi did not wait for her to reply. This kind of matter was not easy to answer in person. She definitely had to discuss it with her clone before making a decision. Moreover, since this matter was brought up by him, he naturally had to set an example. He stood up and said, "Fellow Taoist Lin, think about it yourself. However, no matter what fellow Taoist Lin decides, my Shocking Waves Lake Pass will do the same. Today, I came specially to inform fellow Taoist and hope to receive fellow Taoist's help." Lu Yi left. Lin Yu couldn't make up her mind. Her doppelganger, Li Taibai, naturally didn't know what to do. Thus she instigated. "I've seen that Lu Yi is a straightforward and upright person. I don't think he has any selfish motives for this suggestion. If this matter really works out, it'll be beneficial to both you and the soldiers." Lin Yu said, "Of course I know that, but there has never been a precedent." Li Taibai said, "If Shiji did it, wouldn't there be a precedent? If senior sister really can't make up her mind, then let's wait and see if Lu Yi is all talk and no action. If he really does so, then it won't be too late for us to join in." Lin Yu agreed, "That's good too." Yang Kai couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Lu Yi's cultivation speed was actually on par with his junior brother Tai Bai's, and he had already reached the third order Divine Sea Realm. She couldn't believe it. When Li Taibai reached the third order Divine Sea Realm, she thought that he would be able to leave Lu Yi behind, but it turned out that their cultivation speed was actually the same. A moment later, in the Shocking Waves Lake Pass, Lu Yi gathered his subordinates. There weren't many cultivators at the pass, just like in the Dark Moon Forest Pass, with only 300 people. In the past, it would have been impossible for there to be so few people, but too many people had been transferred away. There were only so many soldiers left. After all, this place was just the front line of the confrontation between the two camps. Even if it was really captured by the insect race, it wouldn't have much of an impact. It wasn't like the War Province, where there were many mortal cities that needed to be strictly guarded. Lu Yi had been here for several months, but this was the first time he had gathered all the cultivators. For a moment, many of the soldiers didn't know what was going on. They only had a vague feeling that their past master was about to make a big move, so they were looking forward to it. On the central field of the pass, Lu Yi looked around. Although he was young, he had a majestic aura. Although he was appointed as the mountain pass master at the last minute, the 300 soldiers still respected him because of the great battle several months ago. Moreover, they had interacted with each other for several months, so the 300 soldiers still respected him quite a bit. Not to mention other things, just the fact that the mountain pass provided funds to compensate the families of the cultivators who died in battle was an unprecedented precedent, so it was very popular. The first thing a cultivator needed to do was to cultivate. Chapter 1090. Pass master joining hands fighting for a future for themselves. But many people had exhausted their potential and had no possibility of further improvement. Naturally, they were thinking about their descendants and relatives. In the past, when they fought against the insect race, they were inevitably restrained, fearing that they would encounter an accident. But now, they were much braver, because even if they unfortunately died in battle, there would be a large amount of compensation left for their descendants. Yu Huang stepped out, clasped his fists and said, "My lord, the 313 people of the Shocking Waves Lake Pass are all present. Please give your orders, my lord." Lu Yi clasped his hands behind his back and nodded slightly. I want to deploy soldiers to the fissure 250 miles away to kill the insect race there. So I need all of you to work together. Yu Huang, choose 50 people to stay behind and hold the fort. The others follow me. Yes, Yu Huang answered and flew into the air. He looked at the crowd. Is there anyone who is willing to stay behind and hold the fort? The group of people were all laughing and joking, but no one took the initiative to volunteer. Yu Huang was naturally familiar with their temperament. Usually, the soldiers would very actively go out to kill the insect race and earn battle merits. There were also people who had thought about the fissure, but because they were alone, they didn't dare to take the risk. Now that Lu Yi was personally leading the troops, this was a rare opportunity, so how could they miss it? He reprimanded. The past master is watching, so all of you better be self-aware, especially those whose cultivation level is not high. Immediately, a Cloud River Tear shouted. So what if our cultivation level is not high? Everyone grows up bit by bit, and we also have to follow the past master out to kill the insect race. Once he said this, all the Cloud River Tears shouted in agreement. Yu Huang felt a headache coming on, and glared fiercely at the Cloud River Tear who had spoken first. Then we'll catch them. Whoever catches them will stay behind, and don't blame the heavens and others. Everyone agreed in unison. Yu Huang began to prepare, and Lu Yi didn't rush him. After a short while, Yu Huang finished his preparations, and walked over with a large jar in his arms. He shouted, line up and come forward, one person each. Once caught, leave no regrets. The many cultivators consciously lined up in 2 lines, and stepped forward one by one. The cultivators who were caught to stay behind couldn't help but look bitter, but they couldn't blame others. Those who were caught to go out with them were naturally jubilant. When everything was ready, Lu Yi called out, and took the lead to fly out, a large group of flowing lights following behind him. Wherever they passed, they would occasionally encounter the insect race, and all of them were killed on the spot. The distance of 250 miles took a full 4 hours to reach, mainly to take care of those Cloud River Tear cultivators in the group. When they reached the fissure, the cultivators immediately formed into groups, and with the help of the connected chi formation plate, they cleared the insect race, exterminating the insects that were crawling out of the cracks in the ground. Lu Yi didn't interfere. Instead, he chose a suitable location nearby to set up a teleportation array. With the help of the formations, the pressure on this side to defend against the insectoids gradually decreased. Lu Yi worked for a long time before saying, fellow Taoist Lin, what do you think? To be honest, with the strength of my startling Waves Lake Pass, although there's no need to worry about defending the fissure, we can't be too careful. If the insectoids are slightly stronger, it'll be very difficult to defend this side. So we really need your pass alliance. Fellow Taoist Lin is a sensible person. In the current situation, only by working together can we stabilize the situation. This is also for the sake of our soldiers. Seeing his sincerity, Lin Yu nodded and said, I naturally understand what fellow Taoist Lu is saying. If your startling Waves Lake Pass can do this, my Dark Moon Forest Pass also doesn't want to be behind others. I'll go back and gather people, and bring them over to help. That's good. However, fellow Taoist Lu, there's something I don't understand. I'd like to ask fellow Taoist for guidance. Fellow Taoist Lin, just say it. I see that the soldiers of your pass are able to form a formation to defend against the enemy. This shouldn't be a coincidence, right? Did they borrow some external force? Please enter the latest update in your browser. To view Chapter 1090, Startling Waves Join Hands. Chapter 1092. After several months of refining, the twin chi-connected branch formation disc had been popularized in the Haotian Alliance's camp in the Force Province. Not only the Force Province, but the other provinces had also begun to benefit from it. However, due to the lack of quantity, the other provinces were not as popular as the Force Province. After all, it was something refined by Lu Yi. Naturally, the Force Province had to satisfy their own needs first, before they could provide it to other provinces. Lu Yi believed that the situation would improve in a few months. This was because Lu Ye's original body and clone were both at the same time. The number of twin qi-connected branch formation discs that could be refined each time would increase exponentially. The people from the myriad Devil Ridge were not blind. Naturally, they saw the changes on the Haotian Alliance's side. Moreover, the two camps had already planted spies in each other's camps. In fact, the myriad Devil Ridge had long known about the existence of the twin qi-connected branch formation disc. They had even tried to get a few formation discs to study and imitate them. However, this thing was not something that could be easily replicated. Back in the blood refinement realm, even a top refining grandmaster like Ouyangzi could not do much about it. If he really wanted to refine it, he could only rely on the pitifully low success rate after repeated failures. Therefore, even if the myriad Devil Ridge obtained the twin qi-connected branch formation disc, they could not refine it on a large scale. They could only be jealous. Lin Yu's position in the myriad Devil Ridge's camp was not very high, but she was still a past master. She had long heard about the existence of the twin qi-connected branch formation disc. She had also mentioned it to her clone Li Taibai. Now that she spoke, the meaning behind her words was self-evident. Lu Yi was already prepared. He casually tossed a storage bag to Lin Yu. Lin Yu took it and suppressed the surprise in her heart. She opened it and was soon shocked. There were exactly 100 twin qi-connected branch formation discs inside. Lu Yi said, "Since we're going to cooperate, I think we should be more open and honest. There's no need to hide anything, and there's no need to scheme against each other. What do you think, fellow Taoist Lin?" Lin Yu fell silent and sighed slightly. "Fellow Taoist Lu, you're magnanimous. I'm ashamed." She originally intended to use the cooperation between the two families to gain some benefits from Lu Yi. Her purpose was this twin qi-connected branches array disc. Otherwise, she wouldn't have brought up such a topic at this time. Who would have thought that she didn't need to say anything at all, as they were already prepared? A moment later, Lu Yi watched Lin Yu leave and continued to set up the fortifications. The twin qi-connected branch formation disc was a strategic resource. Logically speaking, it should not be given away. However, he was the one who had refined this item. Giving away 100 of them was nothing. This way, he could increase the overall strength of the Dark Moon Forest Pass and better defend against the fissures. Lin Yu's speed was still very fast. In just half a day, she brought more than 2 million Devil Ridge cultivators to the side of the fissure to join in the fight against the Zerg and build a line of defense. With the addition of this group of people, the situation at the fissure quickly stabilized. After a few days, everything was arranged properly. Any insect that crawled out of the cracks would be killed by the cultivators at the two mountain passes. Even if there were Spirit Sea Realm insects, it would be the same. However, he did not see any dumb insects. It was rare to see more than 10 dumb insects appearing at the same time. Lin Yu looked for Lu Yi. "Fellow Taoist Lu, I'll have to trouble you to make a trip to the Dark Moon Forest Pass and set up a teleportation formation." "It's my duty." Lu Yi nodded. This was something that the two of them had agreed on before, so Lu Yi naturally wouldn't refuse. Without delay, he immediately set off for the Dark Moon Forest Pass. At the same time, Lin Yu sent a message to her doppelganger, Li Taibai, to inform him of this matter. She asked Li Taibai to find a suitable location to set up the teleportation formation. At the same time, they had to be wary of Lu Yi's secret tricks. It could not be said that the temporary cooperation between the two sects did not mean that they were not on guard. After all, they were in two different camps. If the insect disaster was solved, the situation would return to how it was before. Lin Yu was willing to trust Lu Yi, but it was hard to know what was in a person's heart. Everything had to be prepared. From this point of view, Lin Yu was quite competent as the mountain pass leader. After arriving at the Dark Moon Forest Pass, he met up with his clone. After choosing a location, they set up a teleportation formation that connected to the fissure. Lu Yi directly returned to the fissure through the formation. It only took him a little more than 2 hours. It could be said that he moved like the wind. The fissure, the source of the insect race, was suppressed. It was difficult for new insects to appear within 1,000 miles. Perhaps there were insects that escaped from other fissures. Translator. Hingi Translations Editor. Hingi Translations. Deep into the fissure. In the end, only a small number of insects wandered over. For a time, the two mountain passes' defenses were truly impenetrable. The soldiers no longer had to go out in groups to search for insects. They only had to stay at the fissure and wait for the insects to walk into the trap. This saved a lot of time and energy. After another month, after confirming that the situation had completely stabilized, and that there would not be any major problems, Lu Yi went to find Lin Yu. You want to go deep into the fissure? Lin Yu looked at Lu Yi in shock. That's right. I want to go in and take a look, so I'll have to trouble you here, fellow Taoist Lin. It's not safe to go deep into the fissure. Not to mention that the insect race is everywhere. The deeper you go, the stronger the magnetic field. It's extremely unfriendly to cultivators like us. In the past few years, whether it's your Grand Heaven Alliance or my myriad Devil Ridge, many great cultivators have gone deep into the fissure to investigate. However, they didn't find much. There are even precedents of death and injury. I have to go take a look myself. Maybe I'll find something. Fellow Taoist Lu, you trust me so much? Lin Yu looked at him in confusion. If you leave, your startling Waves Lake Pass will be leaderless. Lu Yi glanced at her. What can you do, fellow Taoist Lin? Kill them all. What good will it do to you and the Dark Moon Forest Pass? You'll have a blood feud for no reason. It'll just increase the pressure of defending against the insect race. I think that since our two sects have a good beginning, we can also have a good ending. Lin Yu was silent for a moment, then she nodded slightly. I'm a woman, and I'm not as bold as you. I can only wish you a safe journey ahead. Fellow Taoists, please don't worry about the fissure. I don't dare to say that I can guarantee their safety, but if they encounter danger, I'll treat them equally. Thank you. After the discussion, Lu Yi called Yu Huang over and told him his decision. Yu Huang hurriedly dissuaded him. My lord, going deep into the fissure is no joke. It's filled with magnetic fields. The deeper you go, the more your cultivation will be suppressed. Why do you have to take this risk? Lu Yi only called him over to remind him to listen to Lin Yu's arrangements after he left. He didn't call him over to dissuade him. Naturally, Lu Yi pretended not to hear him, and continued to remind him. Yu Huang was secretly anxious, but he also knew that he couldn't dissuade him. After a short while, under the gazes of the cultivators on both sides, Lu Yi plunged into the fissure and soon disappeared. On his way down, some insectoids sensed his presence from time to time and tried to attack him, but they were all killed by Lu Yi. With his current cultivation, dealing with these normal insectoids was a piece of cake for him. He could even kill Divine Sea Realm insectoids easily. Only those at the level of big insect could cause him some interference. As long as there weren't too many of them, he could deal with them. The deeper he went, the dimmer it became until he couldn't see any light at all. Fortunately, he had now reached the Divine Sea Realm, so as long as his divine sense remained, he could even close his eyes. He had asked the sect master about the situation below the fissure before. Because the sect master had explored the fissure before, Lu Yi wasn't completely ignorant. He just wanted to come in and see for himself, because he had some methods that others didn't have. Perhaps they could play some unexpected role. Lu Yi moved through the fissure without any obstruction. When he reached a depth of 10,000 feet, Lu Yi felt the spiritual power in his body become slightly condensed. But the situation was very slight. If he didn't look carefully, he wouldn't have noticed it. Usually, this situation was caused by the accumulation of pill toxins in a cultivator's body. They only needed to find a way to neutralize the pill toxins. Naturally, Lu Yi didn't have any pill toxins in his body. The reason for this was that at this depth, there was already a faint magnetic field enveloping him. The magnetic field was an invisible and formless existence, and could be said to be the nemesis of cultivators. Before Lu Yi had opened his spiritual cavities, he had used the magnetic field to kill a steward of Evil Moon Valley, and from then on, he had embarked on the path of cultivation. It was precisely because of the magnetic field that the steward's spiritual power couldn't circulate. Of course, that was also because the steward was too weak. If his cultivation had been a bit higher, It would have been hard to say who would have won. As he continued down, the magnetic field grew thicker and thicker, and the condensed situation in Luya's body also deepened. He could clearly feel that there was a layer of invisible power blocking the flow of his spiritual power. This reduced the strength he could bring to bear, but fortunately, it wasn't too serious. Luyi continued down until he reached the third level. Chapter 1092. Breakthrough deep in the fissure at 3,000 meters. Luya's cultivation had been suppressed to the level of the early Divine Sea realm. If he continued down, he would inevitably fall below the Divine Sea realm, which was undoubtedly very dangerous for him. It was also at this depth that Luyi finally found a huge passage. According to the sect master, this was the insect path. The insect race came out from an unknown depth and crawled out along the insect path, then rushed into the 9 regions from the cracks in the ground to wreak havoc. Almost every crack had an insect path at different depths, but most of them were around 3,000 meters. So logically speaking, as long as one followed the insect path all the way down, they would definitely be able to find the location of the insect nest. At that time, they would only need to deal with the insect nest and solve the problem from the source. Unfortunately, so far, the Divine Sea realm cultivators of the 2 camps of the 9 regions had not been able to go deep enough. This was a dead end, because the deeper they went, the less strength they could bring to bear. Even if it was a powerhouse like the sect master, if they really reached the location of the insect nest, how much strength could they bring to bear? This was also the fundamental reason why the insect disaster had been unresolved for several years. If the insect nest was in a location that was easy to reach, it would have been eradicated by the 9 regions cultivators. Luyi didn't rashly go deep into the insect path. At this position, there were already a lot of insect race members, and there was no lack of Divine Sea realm insect race members. He killed his way here, and his spiritual power could quickly recover, but the physical strength he consumed was real. So he had to make sure that he had the means to protect himself when he encountered danger. Please enter the latest update in your browser. Chapter 1092. Breakthrough deep into the crack. Chapter 1093. Standing at the entrance of the tunnel, Luyi summoned the Dragon Emperor. Amidst a series of explosions, a tall figure appeared with the Dragon Emperor draped over his body. The obscure feeling of spiritual energy circulating in his body disappeared in an instant, and he was able to circulate it freely again. His suppressed cultivation was also restored. Luyi was relieved. The reason why he insisted on exploring the fissure was not on a whim, but because he had a certain level of confidence, and this confidence came from the Dragon Emperor. The reason why something invisible like the metamagnetic field could interfere with the flow of spiritual energy in a cultivator's body was because the field invaded the cultivator's body, forming an invisible obstacle. If the spiritual energy in a cultivator's body was compared to a flowing river, then the obstacles formed by the metamagnetic field were like dams. It was because of these dams that the flow of spiritual energy in a cultivator's body was affected. It was actually very simple to solve this problem. All he had to do was block the erosion of the metamagnetic field. However, it was easier said than done. Cultivators usually did not have such a method. The Dragon Emperor could. This full-body armor wrapped Luyi tightly, completely blocking the erosion of the metamagnetic field. Naturally, it would not affect him at all. However, Luyi could not maintain the Dragon Emperor's armor forever. This thing consumed too much of his body, so he only summoned it now to test it out. After confirming that his idea was feasible, Luyi hurriedly put away the Dragon Emperor. This was his guarantee to enter the tunnel, and he would not use it unless he had no other choice. Moreover, the Dragon Emperor's aura was too fierce. When it was activated, spiritual energy fluctuated, and it was very attractive to the insect tribe. Wearing the Dragon Emperor in a place like the tunnel was like lighting a lamp in the dark. It would definitely attract the insect tribe nearby. Take this moment for example. A large number of insect tribe members were already attracted. The sound of merciful movements came from the depths of the tunnel, and a complicated aura kept approaching. Luyi blocked the exit of the tunnel, and swung his sword to kill the enemies. The scene was very intense. Half a day later, the number of attacking insect tribe members gradually decreased. When Lu Yi had time, he tried to activate the power of the talent tree. The talent tree was an extremely mysterious thing. In the past, he had repeatedly borrowed the power of the talent tree to resist the scorching energy, but he didn't know if it could resist the corrosion of the magnetism field. With a thought, the surface of his body was immediately covered by short roots that could not be seen with the naked eye. The obscurity of his spiritual energy improved slightly, but it was not complete. From the looks of it, the power of the talent tree could resist the corrosion of the magnetic field to a certain extent, but it was not as perfect as wearing the Dragon Emperor. This might have something to do with the talent tree's transformation. Up until now, the talent tree had only undergone one transformation, but Lu Yi could feel that this was not the limit of the talent tree. If there was enough energy, the talent tree would undergo another transformation at a certain time. Perhaps after a few more conversions, the power of the talent tree would be able to completely isolate the corrosion of the metamagnetic field, but it was not possible for now. Lu Yi wasn't too disappointed. He was already very satisfied with such a harvest. Now that he had a way to save his life, it was time to get down to business. Lu Yi stared at an insectoid. This insectoid looked like a sacred beetle, but it was extremely large, and its aura was not weak. Since entering the fissure until now, this was the most powerful insectoid he had encountered. It was only one step away from becoming a big insectoid. Lu Yi didn't kill it not because he couldn't kill it, but because he had other uses for it. The insectoid's attack method was relatively simple. Generally, they used their body's advantages. For example, this sacred beetle only knew how to wriggle its mouth to bite, and use its sharp legs to stab. Lu Yi dodged the attacks of other insectoids, and turned around to ride on the back of this sacred beetle. He raised his hand and pressed it on the head, his spiritual energy surging. An invisible force swept out in all directions. All the insectoids in the vicinity stiffened slightly. The insectoids that were not strong enough were directly knocked unconscious. In an instant the scene was clear. However, Lu Yi could feel the resistance from the sacred beetle. It was true that the insectoids had low intelligence, but every creature had spiritual energy at birth. Even a newborn baby had its own spiritual energy, not to mention this insectoid that was comparable to the divine sea realm. Its spiritual energy wasn't weak, but it didn't know how to use it. The resistance came from the sacred beetle's spiritual energy. Translator, Naebo Studio Editor. Naebo Studio Insect Path. What Lu Yi needed to do now was to tear apart the sacred beetle's spiritual energy in the shortest time possible. The impact of the spiritual energy was like a tidal wave, wave after wave. After 3 waves, Lu Yi finally felt the resistance from the sacred beetle dissipating. This meant that the sacred beetle's spiritual energy had been destroyed. Lu Yi immediately activated his spiritual energy. A moment later, the sacred beetle gradually calmed down. The insectoids that had regained their senses also slowly calmed down. Driven by their instincts, they crawled out. Only the sacred beetle changed its direction and retreated along the path it came from. On the sacred beetle's back, Lu Yi activated the concealment and aura concealment spirit runes to enhance his body. He hid under the sacred beetle's wings, not revealing any aura. The insect path was dark. As long as he didn't reveal his aura, and hid like this, he wouldn't be discovered by the other insectoids. He didn't know if the divine sea realm cultivators, who explored the fissure in the past, had thought of this method. However, if he wanted to use this method, he first needed to have the means to control the insectoids. This alone would be a problem for 99% of the people. Even if some beast-taming school cultivators could use special means to control the insectoids, they couldn't perfectly hide their body and aura for a long time. Therefore, Lu Yi estimated that in the entire 9 provinces, he was probably the only one who could use this method to explore the insectoid nest. Lu Yi couldn't help but feel a heavy burden on his shoulders. All the insectoids were crawling out, but the sacred beetle's behavior was a little strange. Fortunately, it was an insectoid with low intelligence. Therefore, no insectoids cared even if it was strange. If it was a human doing this, he would definitely be stopped and questioned. The insect path didn't lead to the depths of the underground in a straight line. Instead, it turned and turned. The space inside the insect path was also different in size. The wide space could allow more than 10 insectoids to pass together, while the narrow space could only allow 1 or 2 insectoids to pass through. Lu Yi only maintained the minimum level of spreading his spiritual force to check the surroundings. His main goal was to explore the path. Otherwise, if he let the sacred beetle act freely, who knew where it would bring him? There were many forks in the insect path, which were clearly opened by the insectoids. The insectoids were quite good at opening up passages underground. Almost all of them were born with this ability. Nevertheless, because they followed the principle of exploring downward, although there were many forks, they wouldn't get lost. Lu Yi vaguely felt that if he followed those forks all the way up, different forks should correspond to different locations of the fissure. There was no light in the surroundings. In this dark environment, even the flow of time became very blurry. There was only the sound of insectoids crawling around, and the strange sound of their mouths moving. The entire insect path was filled with the aura of various insectoids. Lu Yi originally thought that this trip would be boring, and wouldn't have any twists and turns. However, walking in the dark too often meant that he would eventually encounter a ghost. When a dog insect passed by the sacred beetle, it suddenly stopped and turned to stare at the sacred beetle. Following that, a low roar came from its throat. The insectoids in the surroundings seemed to have received some kind of order. They all stopped and gathered around the sacred beetle. Lu Yi immediately understood that he had been exposed. Without any hesitation, he directly jumped off the sacred beetle's back. Before he landed, he had already summoned the Dragon Emperor. He didn't know how deep he was at this moment, because the path was full of twists and turns. There was no way for him to calculate the depth, but the magnetic field at this location was very dense. It was so dense that he only had half of his strength left. With this kind of strength, in this kind of environment, he could only summon the Dragon Emperor to fight. The moment the Dragon Emperor appeared, his body swayed, and he directly rushed to the dog insect's side. The dragon spine saber slashed down. The dog insect clearly didn't expect such an unforeseen event to happen. By the time the saber landed, it was already too late for it to dodge. The sharp saber split the dog insect's body into two, and dark green insect blood splattered everywhere. In any case, it was a big insect. If it was a head-on fight, Lu Yi would have to expend some effort. However, under the sudden attack, he took its life with a single strike. In the darkness, 2 scarlet streams of light dragged out from his eye sockets. They drifted about, bringing about a wind of death. In just 5 breaths of time, the flowing light dissipated, and the surroundings were filled with nothing but dust. Chapter 1093. Mysterious Beetle Insect Path. It was the corpse of an insectoid. Only the sacred beetle stood there in a daze. Lu Yi hurriedly dispelled the Dragon Emperor, and rushed to the dog insect's corpse. He circulated his spirit energy, and wrapped up a large amount of insect blood, drenching himself in it. In the end, he was still careless. He could use spirit runes to conceal his body and aura, but he couldn't hide his scent. Just now, when the dog insect brushed past the sacred beetle, it had clearly sniffed it. This was also the reason why he was exposed. The dog insect had smelled the scent of a human. The insect blood was sticky, and the feeling of smearing it on his body was very uncomfortable. However, at this time he couldn't care too much. When Lu Yi returned to the sacred beetle's back and hid under its wings, more insectoids gathered from the 2 ends of the insect path. Clearly, they had sensed the spirit energy fluctuation just now and ran over to investigate. However, they only saw a large number of their dead companions. Their low intelligence didn't allow them to understand what had happened. After a while, the insectoids slowly dispersed. The sacred beetle had already left the battlefield and continued to go deeper. Lu Yi discovered something very interesting. After he bathed himself in the blood of the hound bug, the suppression of the magnetism field on his body seemed to have lessened. Originally, he felt that his strength had been suppressed by about half. However, this suppression was clearly weakened to a certain extent. This unintentional discovery made Lu Yi excited. When the insect's blood could actually block the corrosion of the magnetic field, although it couldn't completely block it, the weakening effect was obvious. Please enter the latest update in your browser. Chapter 1093, Mysterious Beetle Insect Path. Chapter 1094. This was a very valuable piece of information, especially for the current 9 prefectures. The insect blood concealed its human scent. The concealment and aura concealment spiritual inscriptions concealed its body and aura, and it hid under the sacred beetle's wings. Only then could the concealment be considered perfect. The journey was smooth, and there were no more traces left behind. However, some insects would still look at the sacred beetle in confusion. After all, they were more intelligent, so they were puzzled by the sacred beetle's actions. However, that was all. This kind of operation was very boring. Lu Yi could only guide the sacred beetle when they encountered a fork in the road, so that it wouldn't go astray. Fortunately, he had other ways to pass the time, such as checking on the situation of his clone. His clone was now guarding the crack in the earth, so it could be considered that he had switched shifts with Lin Yu. Just like how Lin Yu was wary of him, how could he not be wary of Lin Yu? No matter how nice her words sounded, when there was real danger, Lin Yu couldn't be impartial. After all, she was from the Myriad Demon's Ridge. Therefore, his clone volunteered to switch positions with Lin Yu. Lin Yu had no objections, and quickly returned to the Dark Moon Forest Pass. With Li Taibai's clone guarding the crack in the earth, there were nearly 500 cultivators from the 2 clans. In addition, there were various defensive lines constructed by formations. Although the defense wasn't impregnable, as long as they didn't encounter a large-scale insect tide like last time, they could handle it. The cultivators from the 2 clans also tasted the benefits. In the past, they had to form groups to search for insects and obtain battle merits. This was not only inefficient, but it was also easy to encounter danger. For example, if they encountered a divine ocean realm insect that was difficult to deal with, they would have to send a message to their own mountain pass leader to come and save the day. If the mountain pass leader was free and came in time, their lives wouldn't be in danger. However, if the mountain pass leader wasn't free or came late, death and injury were inevitable. Now they didn't have to worry about this. They just had to wait at the crack in the earth. Occasionally, a divine ocean realm insect would come out, but they would be killed by the cultivators. When there were no insect attacks, they could even meditate and cultivate. However, because of the constant conflict, the cultivators from the 2 clans didn't integrate perfectly. They were separated by the crack in the earth, and could be considered to be very distinct. This was already a very rare collaboration. The upper echelons of the 2 camps had already noticed this cooperation model, and had sent their own experts to investigate the cooperation situation at the 2 mountain passes. It was said that the upper echelons of the 2 camps intended to promote this cooperation model, but it would take time. In the depths of Insect Path, Lu Ye's days were dull and boring. He just had to control the scarabs to travel and travel. Because of the distance between them, his strength was constantly suppressed. Now his strength was suppressed to the point where he could only unleash the power of the spirit stream tier. Such suppression was so terrifying that Lu Yi even suspected that if he continued to go deeper, the spiritual energy in his body would be completely imprisoned. At that time, the concealment and aura-concealing spirit tattoos he had cast on his body would lose their effect, and he would not be able to go deeper. He was secretly anxious. He had already gone down who knew how many kilometers underground. So far, other than discovering that the insect blood could weaken the corrosion of the magnetic field, there were no other valuable discoveries. He didn't know if it would be useful to continue like this, but since he had already reached this point, he could only continue to persevere. At the very least, he had to persevere until he could no longer continue. A faint light suddenly entered his eyes. It was extremely dazzling in the darkness. Lu Yi was stunned. He had been in the insect path for more than 10 days. He had always been in a dark environment. Moreover, he was already very deep underground. Where was the light coming from? There were insectoids all around, so it wasn't convenient for him to probe around in case he exposed himself. He could only control the sacred beetle to continue forward. The light grew brighter and brighter. Only when the sacred beetle reached the source of the light did Lu Yi see the scene in front of him. He could not help but be absent-minded. What entered their eyes was an oval-shaped luminous object that was nearly 33 meters tall and several meters wide. It stood quietly at the deepest part of the insect path. The luminous object's surface was blurry like an uneven mirror. Insects kept coming out of the mirror to join the army that crawled out of the insect path. Every time an insectoid crawled out of the mirror would vanish into thin air. Chapter 1094. Warbug Race Mystic Realm. There would be a slight ripple. Door. There was actually a door in the deepest part of the insect path. Lu Yi had entered and exited various small secret realms many times, so he was naturally no stranger to portals. So he recognized what this thing was at a glance. However, why was there a door here? He originally thought that the deepest part of the insect path would be connected to an insectoid nest. However, he didn't expect to see a door instead of an insectoid nest. The question was, where did this door lead to? What puzzled Lu Yi the most was, how did this door form? Did it exist from the beginning? It didn't seem like it. If that was the case, the insectoid plague would have already swept through the 9 provinces. In other words, this door must have appeared a few years ago, along with the earthquake that swept through the 9 provinces. Lu Yi didn't know what kind of place was behind the door, but it was most likely where the insectoid nest was located. This was because there was an endless stream of insectoids crawling out of the door. Behind the door must be the source of the insectoid plague. Lu Yi suddenly felt like he had touched upon the truth of an extremely secretive matter. He dispelled the distracting thoughts in his mind and gave the sacred beetle an order. The sacred beetle stepped forward and walked towards the door. He wanted to go in and take a look. He wanted to see what kind of place the door led to. Light shone brightly as he entered. Since entering the insect path, he had been affected by the invasive derivative of the magnetic field. His spiritual power was completely restored at this moment. In other words, there was no more magnetic field here. This was obviously not the depths of the underground. Looking up, his field of vision was densely packed with insectoids. There were so many of them that it was even more terrifying than the largest insectoid tide he had ever seen. They were everywhere in the sky and on the ground. Lu Yi hid himself even deeper. In the insect path, if his whereabouts were exposed, he might have a chance to use the Dragon Emperor to kill his way out of the encirclement and return to the surface. However, if his whereabouts were exposed in a place like this, the outcome that awaited him was definitely not good. Now there were 2 choices in front of him. One was to retreat from the door. Because the door was behind him, he could return to the original insect path by taking a step back. The second was to continue investigating. Lu Yi naturally wouldn't retreat. He had already come this far. There was no reason to give up halfway. There were so many divine ocean realm cultivators in the 9 provinces who had been searching for the source of the insectoid plague, but to no avail. He had finally come here, so of course he had to take a look. However, he didn't act immediately. Instead, he began to investigate the situation of his clone. With a thought, he could still sense everything on the clone's side. There was no obstruction. Looking at the battlefield imprint, he could also contact others. This meant that he was most likely still in the 9 provinces. Of course, it was also possible that he wasn't in the 9 provinces. Because the door was always open, his connection with his clone wouldn't be cut off. The battlefield imprint could also be used. The only thing he could be sure of was that this was the range of the 9 provinces' heaven secrets. Unlike the blood refinement world, where even the battlefield imprint couldn't be detected, this made Lu Yi feel more at ease. As long as he was still in the range of heaven's secrets, there wouldn't be a big problem. There were too many insectoids on the ground. The entire world seemed to be filled with insectoids. Although the sacred beetle wasn't small, there were countless insectoids that were larger than it. As it charged back and forth, the sacred beetle's wings trembled. Lu Yi hurriedly controlled the sacred beetle to fly into the sky. Firstly, he could avoid a large number of insectoids. Secondly, he could only see further by standing at a high altitude. He really wanted to see what kind of world this was. As he continued to fly higher, there were fewer and fewer insectoids around him. Only when the sacred beetle could no longer fly higher did Lu Yi sneak a peek. First, he looked at the sky. There were many flying insectoids in his field of vision. Each of them had a fierce aura. But compared to the insectoids on the ground, there were far fewer of them. Moreover, the sacred beetle flew high enough so he could avoid being exposed to a large extent. In addition, the concealment and aura concealment spirit runes were maintained. As long as Lu Yi didn't make too much of a commotion, he wouldn't attract the insectoids' attention. Looking down, there was an endless sea of insectoids. They filled this world in layers. In the distance, there seemed to be a towering hill. Even further away, there seemed to be an even greater number of insectoids. Translator, trans and editor. Trans in the insectoid race's great secret realm. In this position, there were even more hills and hills. Lu Yi saw incomparably large and ferocious creatures, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws on the ground. This was an insectoid he had never seen before. Just looking at it from afar, it gave off an extremely strong sense of oppression. One could imagine how strong it was. Lu Yi suddenly remembered that when he returned to the 9 states from the blood-refining realm, he had seen many floating continents in the periphery of the 9 states world. At that time, he had guessed that those floating continents were connected to the various secret realms of the 9 states. It must have included the realm of beasts, the soaring dragon realm, and other places he had been to before. At that time, he had caught a glimpse of a ferocious and terrifying insectoid figure on one of the larger floating continents. However, because he had rushed into the 9 states world quickly, he hadn't been able to see it clearly. Now, it seemed that he hadn't seen wrongly at that time. Was his current location the huge floating continent he had seen at that time? This should also be a secret realm belonging to the 9 states world. However, the scale was so huge that it could no longer be described as a small secret realm. This was a huge secret realm belonging to the insectoids. The insectoids had always existed in the 9 states world. Lu Yi had encountered an insectoid tide in the spirit stream battlefield. At that time, he had been very puzzled as to where those insectoids had come from. Now it seemed that the source should be here. The insectoid tide in the spirit stream battlefield was a test of the spirit stream realm cultivators by the 9 states world secrets. At the same time, it was also a kind of reward because killing insectoids could earn 1 merit points. It could be said that the appearance of the insectoid tide in the spirit stream battlefield was most likely controlled by the secrets of the heavens. If that was the case, then what about the insectoid tide in the 9 states this time? Please enter the latest update in your browser. Chapter 1094. Insectoid Tide Insectoid Race Great Secret Realm. Chapter 1095. The truth behind the insect plague was worth pondering. Perhaps some things were not as simple as they seemed on the surface. At the very least, to hatch such a large number of insects, it would require an astonishing amount of energy and resources. Where would the energy come from? Where would the resources come from? There was not much life in this world. At the very least, from what Lu Yi could see, there was nothing useful to the insects. With a thought, he commanded the sacred beetle to fly close to the edge of this world. Since this was a world like a secret realm, it naturally had an edge. It was unlike the 9 states, which was a huge celestial body. No matter which direction one went, one would eventually return to the starting point one day. Similar to the many small secret realms Lu Yi had been to, the edge of this big secret realm was filled with chaos and nothingness. It gave off an extremely ominous feeling. Even the insects were unwilling to approach it. He had just observed that the door to this place stood at the edge. The sacred beetle's flying speed was still very fast. After all, its strength was not weak. Lu Yi stuck close to the sacred beetle's back and looked down from time to time. Soon, his gaze was attracted to a towering hill on the left. He had seen the hill when he first came in, but only now did he realize that it was not a hill at all, but a huge insect nest. Lu Yi had never observed an insect nest from this angle. Although he had entered an insect nest in the spirit stream battlefield, he had been deep inside the nest. He He had no idea what it looked like from the outside. The shape of the entire insect nest was like a hill-shaped sarcoma. The sarcoma was densely packed with large and small holes, making it look like a beehive. Insects were constantly crawling out of this beehive sarcoma. There was more than one such beehive sarcoma in his field of vision. Lu Yi looked up and saw many hill-like things. They were undoubtedly insect nests standing on this land. These insectoid nests were the reason for the insectoids' massive numbers and size. They were also the source of the insectoid plague. If the cultivators of the 9 states could find a way to kill their way into this big secret realm, they would naturally be able to solve the insect plague. However, the key problem now was that it was extremely difficult to enter. Lu Yi himself had entered, but that was because he had used the soul manipulation rune to control the insects. In addition, he had excellent concealment skills. However, it was not so easy to bring people in. Moreover, given the environment here, a small number of people would not help at all. At the very least, an army would be needed to get rid of the insects here. Lu Yi had never seen insectoids killing each other in the 9 provinces. At most, those insectoids would eat the corpses of their dead companions. However, in this great secret realm, the insectoids did not get along peacefully. Fighting and killing were almost everywhere. The corpses of the dead insectoids were eaten by the survivors and turned into powerful resources for the survivors. This was probably the reason why the insectoids were able to give birth to so many powerful existences. They constantly devoured their companions to strengthen themselves, becoming stronger bit by bit, or becoming food for even more powerful beings. The reason why they couldn't be seen in the 9 regions was probably because there were better things that attracted them, which made them suppress their instinct to kill each other. For example, the fluctuation of spiritual energy, or the vitality of humans. During this period of time, the sacred beetle was targeted by a ferocious insect. That insect was definitely at the level of a large insect. Regardless of whether it was its size or strength, it was stronger than the sacred beetle. In a panic, Lu Yi secretly blessed the sacred beetle with a wind travel spirit rune. Only then was he able to escape. He broke out in a cold sweat. In this place, if he did not have the sacred beetle's cover, once he was exposed, he would definitely die without a burial place. Even bringing out the Dragon Emperor would be useless. He continued to fly, not daring to go too deep into the center. The closer he went to the center, the more insects there were. On the contrary, because of the instinctive fear of the chaotic nothingness, not many insectoids approached the edge, which made Lu Ye's situation safer. During this period of time, Lu Yi observed more than a dozen huge insectoid nests and several ferocious and terrifying giant insects. Those giant insects had the ability to overturn rivers and seas. Even the top divine sea realm cultivators in the 9 regions would not be a match for them. If he wanted to defeat such giant insects, he could only win by relying on numbers. After a few hours, a light came into view below, attracting Lu Ye's attention. When he looked down, he could not help but be startled. This was because the source of the light was actually another door. Although Lu Yi was not very familiar with this large secret realm, since he was already here, his sense of direction was not a problem. Therefore, he was completely certain that this door was not the one he had entered from, but another. He was a little surprised, but after thinking about it carefully, he quickly felt relieved. The 9 regions was enormous, and there were countless fissures in the ground and insect paths. Even if he went deeper, the frequency of insect paths converging would increase. In the end, it was impossible for them to connect to the same place. This meant that this great secret realm had more than one door to the 9 regions. As for how many there were, he did not know. Lu Yi really wanted to know where this second door was connected to. After thinking about it, he ordered the sacred beetle to fly down, and a moment later, he squeezed through the swarm of insects and crossed the door. That familiar feeling of being suppressed by the magnetic field, once again, made Lu Ye's spirit chi circulation become incomparably sluggish. Fortunately, he had been prepared, otherwise his aura would have been exposed. Lu Yi quickly took out the 10-point map and compared it with his current location. He quickly determined that his current location was actually in the Thunder region. However, because he was too deep underground, the markings on the map were not obvious. As for where exactly he was in the Thunder region, he did not know. He hurriedly put away the 10-point map and ordered the sacred beetle to return to the insect race's great secret realm through the door. It took a lot of effort to travel in the opposite direction, but he finally returned. Just like before, he immediately rose into the air and continued to investigate. Sure enough, after a few hours, Lu Yi saw the third door. In the next few days, Lu Yi ordered the sacred beetle to explore this place. When he first returned to the 9 regions from the blood refinement realm, such a great secret realm did not look too big from afar. It was just one of the larger floating continents, but when he actually entered it, he understood how vast it was. It was about the size of a continent. In other words, the size of this great secret realm was basically comparable to the Spirit Stream battlefield. The number of doors was very thought-provoking. There were exactly 9 of them. Every time Lu Yi passed by a door, he would go in and out once to confirm his position. The 9 doors corresponded to the 9 continents of the 9 regions. If this was a coincidence, it was too much of a coincidence. Lu Yi faintly saw some mysterious and profound methods. However, he could not figure out why for the time being. A few days after entering the insect race's great secret realm, Lu Yi returned to the door he had entered from. The situation of this great secret realm had basically been explored. It could be said that he had gained a lot. Lu Yi did not want to destroy those insect nests and solve the current predicament of the 9 regions by himself. That was not reality. An individual's strength was ultimately limited. In this calamity that was sweeping through the 9 regions, only the cultivators of the 9 regions working together could overcome this crisis. In a sense, this matter was a crisis, but it was also an opportunity to change the situation that had been maintained for thousands of years between the 2 factions of the 9 regions. At the very least, the 2 factions had stopped fighting. Thinking of this, Lu Yi seemed to understand something. He ordered the sacred beetle to enter the door and leave the insect race's great secret realm. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. When a person was in the insect race's great secret realm, they were really walking on the edge of life and death. Once exposed, they would not have a good ending. Now that they had come out, they could control their own fate. However, Lu Yi could not show himself for the time being. He could only continue to hide under the sacred beetle's wings and let it crawl out along the insect path. He originally wanted to go back the way he came, but there were too many forks in the road ahead. How could he go back the way he came? In any case, no matter which path he took, he would eventually return to the surface, so he might as well just leave it to fate. He just had to be careful not to run into the myriad Devil Ridge's territory. The 2 factions were indeed not fighting, but they were clearly separated. If he appeared in the myriad Devil Ridge's territory at this time, it was very likely that some misunderstandings would occur. For this reason, he had no choice but to take out the map from time to time and use it to determine his approximate location. It was another difficult journey. It was not until 10 days later that Lu Yi's cultivation had recovered to 70% that he came out from under the sacred beetle's wings. With a thought, the sacred beetle suddenly stopped breathing and crawled on the ground. Lu Yi raised his hand and shot out a fire phoenix. The raging flames wrapped around the sacred beetle and quickly burned it to ashes. He drew his saber and rushed forward along the insect path. Along the way, there were insects that sensed the fluctuations of spiritual power and turned back to block him, but they all died. He charged and killed along the way. When he could no longer feel the suppression of the magnetic field, he finally rushed out of the insect path and entered the fissure. His figure soared into the sky, and saber light wantonly swept out. The light above his head became more and more obvious. Finally, at a certain moment, he got rid of the darkness and saw the light. Lu Yi let out a long breath. Although this trip to the insect race's great secret realm was not thrilling, his nerves had not relaxed since he went deep underground. Especially after he really entered the insect race's great secret realm. The month-long journey made even him feel exhausted. The main reason was that the sacred beetle's crawling speed was not fast enough, especially when he was moving in the opposite direction of the insect race. Sometimes, he would be knocked back by more powerful insects. Otherwise, it would not have taken so long. However, he had gained a lot from this trip. At the very least, he had figured out the situation inside the insect race's great secret realm. Now, as long as he could solve the problem of how to resist the suppression of the magnetic field and weaken his strength, the cultivators of the 9 regions could mobilize their armies and kill their way into the insect race's great secret realm. At that time, with the powerful foundation of the cultivation world of the 9 regions, it would not be difficult to solve the insect disaster. Chapter 1096. There were no cultivators guarding the fissures he came out of. Cultivators who were qualified to guard an earth fissure had to be at least in the Divine Sea realm, and they had to be at least in the 3rd order Divine Sea realm, because only cultivators at this level had a chance of escaping from the giant insect. If a true lake realm cultivator was asked to guard the fissures, if a dumb insect appeared, they wouldn't be able to escape and would lose manpower for nothing. Therefore, even though there were many cultivators in the Spirit Sea realm in the 9 continents, not every fissure was guarded by a cultivator in the Spirit Sea realm. Only the bigger fissure would send cultivators in the Spirit Sea realm. If the fissure wasn't big, they could only let it happen. There was nothing they could do about it. Lu Yi took out the 10 points map to check his location. Not bad. He didn't appear in the territory of Myriad Demon Ridge. He was still in the Weapon Province. His current location wasn't too far from Grand Sky City. With his speed, he could arrive there in less than an hour. Lu Yi determined the direction and flew towards Grand Sky City, while sending a message to the sect master. This time, he went deep into the insect race's mystic realm and obtained a lot of useful information. He had to report it to the sect master. As far as he knew, the sect master's current task was to explore the depths of the fissures. In recent years, the old man had gone deep into the fissures and killed his way into the insect path, no less than hundreds of times. Unfortunately, he returned empty-handed every time. Soon, he received a reply that the sect master was not in Grand Sky City. He was chasing after a few dumb insects that escaped from the fissures. However, the battle was coming to an end and would end soon. Go back to Grand Sky City and wait for me. The sect master didn't know what he was going to do, but he knew that if it wasn't something particularly important, his disciple would send messages to him at will. Lu Yi received the order and continued to fly towards Grand Sky City. After an hour, he entered the city. Instead of returning to his small courtyard, he went to the sect master's office and waited quietly. After another half an hour, a stream of light swept in from outside the city and landed straight in the courtyard, revealing the sect master's figure. Lu Yi saluted. Sect master. The sect master stretched out his hand and stroked his beard, looking at him with gratification. He couldn't help but feel a little emotional. In a trance, the little brother that he unintentionally took in had grown to such a degree. It could be said that this was definitely the fastest growing brother since the establishment of the Blue Blood sect. Even in the entire history of the 9 regions, there was almost no one who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Some of his special experiences were even strange to an experienced warrior at the Spirit Sea realm like him. However, there were always demons in troubled times. Especially in the current situation, the rapid rise of the sect's disciples had undoubtedly revealed something. Standing higher, he could see further. He could vaguely sense many things that Lu Yi could not detect. He brought Lu Yi into the house, and Lu Yi skillfully took out a tea set to boil some tea. Only then did the sect leader ask, "Is everything fine at the pass recently?" "Not bad." Lu Ye's head was lowered, and his doppelganger was sitting on the ground. The cultivators at the 2 mountain passes could be considered to be working together for the time being. Whenever an insect crawled out of the ground, it was immediately killed. During this period, there were even 2 instances where a giant insect appeared, but it did not even have the chance to make a splash before it was instantly killed by countless attacks. This was the benefit of setting up a formation at the fissure. They could get rid of some of the more troublesome races immediately. Otherwise, if those large insects were to come out of the fissure, they would have to send out the deity ocean to hunt them down, which would be very troublesome. Did anyone find trouble with you? The headmaster asked again. No, this disciple is an honest and dutiful person. I have never made enemies with anyone. How could anyone find trouble with me? No, this disciple is an honest and dutiful person. I have never made enemies with anyone. How could anyone find trouble with me? The corner of the headmaster's eyes twitched. There were many suspicious points about Lu Yueme's death. After all, she was a 7th-order divine sea realm cultivator. She was not weak, so how could she die for no reason? Even if she really encountered a difficult opponent or insect race, at least she could send a message before she died. But in fact, before Lu Yueme's death, no one received any news. This was the biggest doubt. As for whether it was his disciple who killed her or not, the headmaster did not know, and he would not ask. But after Lu Yueme's death, it was a fact that Lu Yi appeared near Shocking Waves Lake Pass. Whether it was Lu Yi or Li Bai, it was also a fact that both of them had a grudge against Lu Yueme. It was also a fact that the two heroes of War Province had joined forces and cooperated very well. They could kill several large insects together, so it was not necessarily impossible for them to kill Lu Yueme. But what exactly had they done to prevent Lu Yueme from sending a message? No one knew. Of course, from the standpoint of the headmaster, Lu Yueme's death was not a big deal. That woman was not a good thing. So he immediately sent a message to Thought Moon Immortal. Chapter 1096, Death. The Headmaster's Shock. Gentle reminder. To prevent incomplete content in text from being out of order, please do not use the browser, app, reading mode. She went to report to Yu Huajin, but as a result, Thought Moon Immortal took half of Yu Huajin's life. There was no need to tell this to this disciple. It would only cause more trouble. Now that you're the master of a pass, it's not good for you to run around. Plus, you're responsible for making the explosive fire spiritual rock and the formation board. The formation board has been popularized in the military province, but the other 8 provinces still need it. The Haotian alliance is a whole, so it's not good for us to neglect the others. Pangzhen has been under a lot of pressure recently. Now that you have the ability, you should help the alliance. Lu Yi answered respectfully. That is why I went to the depths of the fissure a few days ago to investigate the situation. Cough cough. The headmaster almost choked himself to death with a mouthful of tea. He put down the teacup and scolded with a straight face. Nonsense. There are many dangers in the depths of the fissure. Even I do not dare to go there casually. How can you take such a risk? As if he felt that his tone was a little harsh, he said gently, Yi, you are still young. You have a bright future ahead of you. Don't go to places that are too dangerous. It is enough for old men like us to explore the depths of the fissure, but it is not easy for us to go there. Lu Yi kept nodding his head and agreed. Seeing him like this, the headmaster knew that he did not listen to him. But then again, if this disciple was really an obedient child, who listened to everything the elders said, he probably would not have achieved what he had today. Cultivators were a group of people who did not know their place. The more capable they were, the more restless they would be. Did you find anything? The headmaster asked casually. Lu Yi quickly took out a few shadow recording stones and handed them to the headmaster. I found something. Please take a look at it. The headmaster took it and casually picked up one of the stones. He immersed his divine consciousness in it to investigate. He did not think too much because Lu Yi's strength was obvious. Even if he went deep into the fissure, what valuable discovery could he find? But after all, this was brought back by his disciple who risked his life. As the headmaster, he had to take a look at it. However, when he began to investigate the images in the shadow recording stone, his expression changed, and he sat up straight. It was because that shocking scene was something he had never seen before. There was an overwhelming swarm of insects, a shadowy hill-like insect nest, and an oval-shaped door that emitted light. Each of them brought a huge impact to the headmaster's mind. He suddenly raised his eyes and looked at Lu Yi in surprise. Yi, this is... Lu Yi's expression was solemn. This place, I call it the insect race's great realm. These scenes are all from there. the insect race's secret realm? Yes. Lu Yi nodded. The headmaster's face was undeniable. You found the source of the insect disaster. How did you do it? He had been going deep into the fissure for the past few years to find the head of the insects. But he had never succeeded. The deeper he went, the more his cultivation was suppressed. When he encountered powerful insects, he could only temporarily retreat. He did not expect that this disciple of his sect would actually do what he could not do. This time, not only did he lose, but all the old fellows in the entire state were also defeated. He did not have any other thoughts. He only felt gratified that his disciple was so promising. What Lu Yi could do, his method could be used as a reference. If it could be popularized, then the biggest problem in the 9 regions would be solved. Lu Yi explained, this disciple has some special means to control the insects, so I found a way to control a divine sea realm insect and hit on its back. It took me all the way to the end of the insect path. The headmaster also knew that this disciple was a spiritual tattooist, so he blessed himself with concealment and aura-concealing spiritual tattoos, and smeared insect blood on his body to hide his aura. The trip was daunting but not dangerous. The headmaster immediately understood that Lu Yi's method could not be imitated by others. Now the people who explored the fissure in the 9 regions were basically divided into 3 factions. Body cultivators, ghost cultivators, and beast taming school cultivators. Body cultivators did not need to be mentioned. The interference and erosion of the magnetic field made the spiritual power in the cultivator's body obscure. Body cultivators could at least rely on their physique to persist for a longer time in the depths of the earth. If it was another cultivator, they would definitely not be able to succeed, and they might even lose their lives. As for ghost cultivators, although their physique was not as strong as body cultivators, they were good at hiding themselves and could sneak around. However, this method of doing things depended on luck, because the insect path was sometimes not wide enough. Once they encountered the insects, there was a risk of being exposed. The beast taming school controlled the insects to explore the path. However, the cultivators of the beast taming school were not very strong, so their ability to protect themselves in the insect path was very weak. Chapter 1096, Beast Taming School. The headmaster's shock. Gentle reminder. To prevent incomplete content in text from being out of order, please do not use the browser, app, reading mode. One thing to note was that the beast taming school's law did not have an obvious effect on the insects, and there was no way to make the insects obey. Lu Yi's method combined the beast taming school and ghost cultivators, who could imitate it. In the past, ghost cultivators and beast taming school cultivators cooperated, just like Lu Yi. However, once the insects were too far away from their masters, they could no longer control them, and the ghost cultivators lost their lives in vain. This disciple encountered a door at the end of the insect path. After entering, it would be the insect race's great secret realm. While Lu Yi was speaking, the headmaster quickly checked the few image recording stones. For a powerhouse like him, it was normal to divide his attention. Although the images in the image recording stones were created by Lu Yi after a few days, the headmaster's divine sense was activated, and he saw through it in a moment. What he saw and heard was beyond imagination. Originally, everyone in the 9 regions thought that there was a huge insect nest in the depths of the earth, and that the nest was the source of the insect disaster. But now, it seemed that this was not the case. The situation was worse than expected. Please enter the latest update in your browser. Go to the Exquisite Book Pavilion to view Chapter 1096. Disaster. The headmaster's shock. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.